Good afternoon, everyone. I call the August 23rd Newport Beach Public Facilities Corporation meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect Director O'Neill has an excused absence.
Thank you. Okay, now we have public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. So this is for agenda and non-agenda items, public comment.
It's corporation only. Corporation only. We'll do the study session in a second.
All right, now is the time for the election of officers.
This is the time in which the directors can select. Generally, the mayor becomes the chairperson and the mayor pro tem, the vice chair, and the rest of the council members, the board of directors. So we'll need a motion in a second.
I'll move that.
I move Mayor Kevin Muldoon to serve as the chairperson of the corporation.
I'll second.
Mayor Pro Tem Noah Blom to serve as the vice chairperson of the corporation.
I'll second.
And council members to serve as the corporation board of directors.
Do you need a second?
Yes.
Second.
All right. All right. We'll now hear public comments for this particular item.
One moment, you still need to vote Director Brenner and Avery.
There we go.
Unanimous 6-0.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Avery. Director Avery, I should say. Now we'll go on to the first item, which is approval of the minutes of the August 24, 2021 Newport Beach Public Facilities Corporation meeting. That's from last year. Vice Chair Blonde, do you have a motion?
I do. I'd like to move the balance. And do we have changes to those minutes, Leilani? No. Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second from Director Avery. Any comments from the directors on the dais on this? Okay, seeing none, let's vote.
Motion carries unanimously 6-0.
Thank you. On to item 2, we have review of annual financial statements. Grace? Oh, yes, Scott?
Would you like a brief report? Very brief.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Attached for your review are the financial statements for the corporation. There's nothing unusual to report this year, so unless you have any questions, I don't have a formal presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any director questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I move.
Second, Diane.
Go ahead, Director.
I move to accept the financial statements.
Thank you. We have a second from Vice Chair Blom. Let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously 6-0.
Thank you. We will now adjourn briefly to reset the system for the City Council study session. Meeting order for the August 23rd, 2022 study session. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that Councilmember O'Neill has an excused absence.
Thank you. On to current business. The first item is clarification of items on the consent calendar. Do we have any clarifications on these items? Councilmember Duffield. Councilwoman Dixon.
I have none.
Councilman Brenner. Councilman Avery.
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Blom.
And I have none.
And I have none as well. So next we have a proclamation recognizing International Literacy Day. Do we have Melissa Hartson and Jessica Bass? Hi, please just identify yourself if you'd like to say a couple words.
Good afternoon, Mayor Muldoon, members of council. I am Melissa Hartson, your Library Services Director. I just briefly want to take a moment to state how proud I am of our Project Adult Literacy program. Many of you are familiar with the program and all that it has to offer. So many great success stories come out of it. When somebody offers to assist somebody with reading and writing skills to teach them how to read and write, that not only transforms the lives of each individual that's part of that program as a learner, but it transforms their families' lives, which also extends to the community and beyond. So I am thankful for those people that do volunteer their time through our Project Adult Literacy program, and so thankful for those success stories that continue to come out of that program day after day, year after year. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jessica Bass, the president of our Literacy Advisory Board.
Hey there, thanks Melissa. We very much appreciate you guys' support, and I just wanted to say we do have a very special International Literacy Day event on September 8th in the Friends Room at 10 a.m. All the learners bring an eclectic potluck. They tell their stories. You get a pamphlet including all of their writings from the past year or so. It's always a very special day. It takes 2 hours out of your week, and we really hope you come, and to the community, we would love for you to come. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I'll read a proclamation at this time. Whereas the need for a highly literate citizenry is necessary as Newport Beach moves on towards an increasingly challenging future. And whereas approximately 10% of the residents of Newport Beach and some of the employed within the city are lacking the literacy skills necessary to meet these challenges. Whereas lack of literacy skills impacts not only their lives and the lives of their families, but their ability to work productively and their participation as citizens, residents, and employees of our city. And whereas Project Adult Literacy, a program of the Newport Beach Public Library, works with adults seeking to develop their literacy skills to empower them to achieve greater success in their lives at home, at work, and in the community. And whereas Project Adult Literacy, a program of the Newport Beach Public Library, hosts an annual International Literacy Day to highlight the importance of literacy in society and the great strides that program participants have made. Now, therefore, I, Kevin Muldoon, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, do hereby proclaim September 8th, 2022 as Literacy Awareness Day. Try to read that as fast as I could to prove a point. Literacy is very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to take a quick picture with the council at the flags? Sure.
Oh, 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, the next proclamation is recognizing Hunger Action Month. Do we have Malia Carey in the audience? I would like to say a couple words.
Good afternoon. My name is Malia Carey. I'm the Government and Public Affairs Coordinator with Second Harvest Food Bank of Orange County, and I'm here today as a representative of the OC Hunger Alliance. The OC Hunger Alliance is a collaboration between 3 organizations, Abound Food Care, OC Food Bank, and Second Harvest Food Bank of Orange County. And together, we are united and committed to reducing food waste, ending poverty and hunger, and providing dignified, equitable, and consistent access to the healthiest food possible for the most vulnerable among us. Thank you to the City Council today and to the City of Newport Beach for recognizing September as Hunger Action Month and raising awareness of hunger and food insecurity in our county. At Second Harvest, prior to COVID-19, we served approximately 249,000 food insecure individuals here in our county. And at the height of the pandemic in July 2020, that number was well over 600,000 individuals every month. Today, the need remains elevated, and we're serving an average of 332,000 individuals every month, including our senior and college student neighbors right here in Newport Beach. Right now, 1 in 11 people in Orange County is food insecure, including approximately 1 in 8 children. So throughout the month of September, we double down on our commitment. We extend our hands out in partnership and invite those who want to help to visit feedoc.org/Hunger Action Month to learn more about giving your time, food, and or funds to support our OC neighbors in need in September. So thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, I'll read the proclamation. Whereas hunger, poverty, and food and nutritional insecurity are issues of vital concern in California, where 20% of Californians face food insecurity on a daily basis. And 1 every 6 children do not know where their next meal will come from. Whereas the city of Newport Beach is committed to taking steps to combat hunger in every part of our community and provide additional resources to those in Newport Beach. Whereas the city of Newport Beach is committed to working with the Orange County Hunger Alliance and educating people about the role and importance of food banks in addressing hunger and raising awareness of the need to devote more resources and attention to hunger issues. Whereas more than 800,000 individuals in Orange County on average rely on food provided by the CAPOC, Orange County Food Bank, Second Harvest Food Bank of Orange County, and the Abood Food Care Monthly. Whereas members of the Orange County Hunger Alliance have distributed more than 82 million pounds of food in the last year through its networks of food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, and other community organizations. Whereas the month of September has been designated Hunger Action Month. Whereas food banks across the country, including members of the California Association of Food Banks, host numerous events throughout the month of September to bring awareness to help the hunger and food insecurity in their local community. Now, therefore, I, Kevin Muldoon, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, on behalf of the entire Newport Beach City Council, do hereby proclaim September 2022 as Hunger Action Month. Thank you. If you like the same, we'll take pictures, hand the proclamation, and thank you.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, wrong desk. Thought I'd be the mayor.
Oh, Avery was. You can do it too.
Mayor Muldoon, I neglected to mention that agenda item number 18, the appeal of the coastal development permit to allow the construction of a single-family residence on Bay Island, that the appellant has withdrawn that item. I know there were a couple people that wanted to speak to it. I was thinking maybe before we go on to the rest of the study session.
Great. Yeah. So what we'll do is it's been withdrawn, but if you were here to speak on that Bay Island item and you really want to be heard, you can do so when I call you up for comments on non-agenda items. So that'll be shortly. Mr. Harp, did you request I do that before item 4?
I know there's maybe 1 or 2 people just here for that particular item. I'm not sure if they're interested in the electric bikes. I thought maybe it'd be good to have them speak.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Beforehand.
I'm happy to. So what I'll do is I'll move public comments on agenda items before the study session item number 4, which is electric bikes. So if you'd like to speak now on non-agenda items, including the Bay Island issue, now is appropriate time. Please come forward.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I provided a handout that you may have that has some photos of projects of Gilbert Stanley Underwood, the architect for 20 Bay Island, and also some photos of Bay Island. So I'd love it if at least you'd take a look at those. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Clark Collins, and I'm here regarding 20 Bay Island. Councilmember Brenner, recently you posted on social media asking citizens to come to council, respectfully explain the situation, and be clear in what you're asking for. So fingers crossed, I'm going to do that. I'm asking that you be open to the idea that staff and the Planning Commission made a mistake in not doing a historic evaluation of 20 Bay Island before coming to the conclusion that the project was exempt from CEQA. Bay Island is unique. Since its founding in 1903, owners of the 23 lots do so by membership and ownership in a cooperative. They own shares in the Bay Island Corporation, and a stock certificate is issued in lieu of the usual deed of trust. Because of this ownership structure, early ownership and building permit records are incredibly hard to access. It's no wonder that staff had no idea of the pedigree of either the architect or the Chandler family, the original owners of the home. As I'm sure you've read, Gilbert Stanley Underwood was unquestionably a master architect. With a distinguished 40-year career and 20 of his projects listed on the National Historic Register, he's a treasure. Some of the projects include the most famous of the national park lodges, including the Ahwahnee in Yosemite, the Jackson Lake Lodge in Grand Teton, the Grand Canyon Inn, the Zion Lodge. And in addition, he designed 17 Union Pacific train stations and 20 incredible post offices. I like to think of this home as a rare find in an antique store, the kind that might end up on Antique Roadshow. And rather than tossing it in the trash, I'm asking that you consider treasuring and preserving it. Structures like these are the defining cultural assets in our city, and to lose this would be a huge loss for Newport and the Bay. I've included some photos of Underwood's projects and the photos of the home in case you haven't had a chance to view it. It sits on the end of Bay Island and is visible for many parts of the bay and the peninsula. The home has changed very little since it was constructed in 1930. My parents restored it in the early 2000s, and I know they spent a significant amount of money to preserve the exterior and in particular the steel windows. I'm just asking that you please vote to have staff give it a second look, and please ask them to do the historic evaluation that was potentially missed the first time around. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward.
Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Eric Spitz. I am a resident of Newport Beach, and recently I was made aware that my neighbors are the Mental Health Collective. They just bought the residence next door to me. When I learned about it, I tried to figure out who they were. And lo and behold, I found out they were scofflaws. They were blatantly doing things illegal, running short-term residential therapeutic programs in Newport Beach without a license. So I called my I called Katrina Foley, the supervisor. I learned that this is a big issue in Newport Beach. But it turns out that you've known about it and you've chosen to do nothing. It is your zoning violation. It is your zoning code that they are violating. It's not the state's. Yes, they are in a state licensed process, but right now, they are running illegal facilities in your city, breaking your zoning code. They're illegal because they are short-term, unlicensed residential facilities. And when I speak to people at the city, they tell me that's okay. It's okay because they're in a license process. I'm in the marijuana business. It's not okay to be in a license process and then assume that you can do the things as if you had a license. I wish it were. I'd have opened lots of different licensed facilities well before I was able to. But when you're in a process, you don't have the license yet. Why are they still allowed to open? They're running 3 facilities today. Illegal by Newport Beach zoning, short-term, unlicensed residential facilities. What they are halfway houses. Illegal halfway houses in this city. Why? Any response?
This is your chance to make public comments. The council doesn't typically respond to the comments you make.
Fine. I appreciate it. I would suggest that you think about why they are allowed to continue. When asked, I was told that the judge might not act fast enough and they might get their license anyway. Well, that would be bad if they got their mental health license because they faked their way through the process. They faked their way through. They're telling the state that they're running licensed facilities, but they're not. They are unlicensed. So please, please keep Newport Beach as a city that abides by its own laws. Thank you.
Next speaker, please come forward.
Council members and staff, my name is Laura Curran. First, I'd like to note that there are election forums going on for the upcoming elections all over Newport Beach, including September 14th, Speak Up Newport, September 28th, the Corona Del Mar Residents Association. And I saw a picture of Jim Mosier, one of the candidates, in a tie. So I'm going to come to speak up Newport just for that. So in follow-up to the last speaker, as a resident who lives near drug and alcohol rehabs, which are licensed but combined operate as an integral facility in violation of their license, I'm impacted by this issue of drug rehabs every day. And residents have been invested significant time and effort over 12 years to educate the council and talk to staff about how we can pursue this. Most recently, there were efforts spanning from the summer up through March of 2022, but we have not received any updates or conference calls since. We've been told to call and talk to staff, which is always welcome, the outreach, but the fact that I should spend time to get an update on things that we've been told we were being worked on is infuriating. So I'm going to give an ask. One of the items that we'd like an update on is what is the status of hiring a lobbyist and other qualified legal representative and staff, such as Natalie Busmachian, who are qualified to deal with this issue and can deal with other cities and states in a concerted way to enforce our ordinances, 1, to pursue legislation, 2, and 3, to report facilities which may be violating the law and pursue it vigorously. Because I, for example, still, after 2 years of asking city staff, do not know who the licensed operator is on the license of the operations in Corona Del Mar. That would seem like an easy question, and if we can't get the answer, we should source it to someone who can. So, as another update, I'll provide an update. Residents and people in treatment are impacted when there is poor management. This Friday, our city had a police call in Corona Del Mar for over an hour that I saw, and my neighbor says there was, and I don't know the status of the call yet because I have to call the police department and ask what happened. There was on Sunday morning at 1 o'clock, as you can see in the picture, 2 fire engines that showed up outside my front door. I happened to go upstairs to turn out a light, and I saw these 2 fire engines. So these are resources that are being used and impacts on the residents. What's even more upsetting is that the residents work on this issue. We put faith in our council and our staff. We educate people, and then nothing happens. Or we're told we should bring more information to the table. We should help facilitate the connections with other legislators and members of staff and other cities. And that takes a tremendous amount of time and a tremendous amount of personal effort. So we ask you to think about that impact as really the greatest impact on our residents, along with poor quality of treatment for people who come to Newport Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that those are the 2 speakers on this issue. Ms. Harp, could you address the first speaker and the second speaker, and also the item that I think I brought forward on a lobbyist that we were supposed to engage for Sacramento?
Yeah, I mean, I think the city is just as concerned as Mr. Spitz about, state-regulated facilities opening up in Newport Beach without having the proper licenses. These are facilities that are regulated by the state. The state's taken away virtually all of the city's ability to regulate them. They have an extensive area of law that they could impose fines. They could, not license these facilities. But the state refuses to, and we look forward to working with Mr. Spitz and our other legislators to try to return local authority to the city of Newport Beach in order to enforce, because what we have is basically a very limited window from when we find out that they're not licensed to when they get licensed. Mental Health Collective has had a little bit more time between the period we found out they weren't licensed and the period of them actually getting licensed, primarily because there's been a lot of turnover at the state level, so they haven't been able to get the employees of the state to come out and inspect the facilities. But with the Mental Health Collective, they're going to be licensed here probably in the next month. They had an inspection of their facility on Orchid recently, and typically license issued 2 weeks after the inspection. They've been approved at the state level, so they're going to be licensed, and they're going to be regulated by the state. But, we feel very strongly that that local authority should be returned to us from the state, because we really don't have any problems with the group homes that are regulated by the city. It's all the facilities that are regulated by the state.
Okay, one second. Before we go to Councilman Dixon, Did we hire that person? I think we voted on that issue to hire someone in Sacramento to help advocate for this.
We're still in the process right now. We have an RFP.
Okay, oh, it's RFP. Okay, so that's going through the RFP process. And then, is there a reason why we can't find out who's on the license? Is there protection that they get, or?
So Laura's filed several, Ms. Cram's filed several complaints with the state about who's actually operating the facility and whether or not they've got the right owner on the license. And we tend to agree with Ms. Cram that we think that the person who is operating that facility is not the same person that's listed on the license. It's been thoroughly reported to the state. We followed up with the state about it. That's another facility that's regulated by the state, and the state refuses to take any action. I appreciate that she wants to come here and tell us about the issue, but we don't regulate that facility. The state does, and the state refuses to take any action related to it.
Interesting. Councilman Dixon?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Harp, the reference that this is in the licensing process, and it could be another month, as you just said, is there any legal remedy? Couldn't we file an injunction just to make sure that this operation ceases to operate until it does get its license that we cannot do anything about?
So traditionally in Newport Beach, the way that we've handled these issues as far as facilities that we found that are unlicensed, and this is across the board, whether it's a restaurant or any other type of facility, if they can get licensed and they get into the license process and they're diligent about pursuing the license, we typically stay enforcement until we see whether or not they can get the license or not. And in this case, the Mental Health Collective, I've been on them from the moment we found out about it. I don't believe any of the delays in getting the license is really on their side of the coin. The state has taken a long time to process these applications, primarily because they don't have the employees. They keep losing employees. There's a shortage of people that are working at them. But traditionally, across the board, whether it's a group home or other type of facility or other business, if they get into the license process and diligently pursue it, we typically will stay enforcement while that's pending.
But I guess that's subjective if there is a public health matter. If they're not licensed and perhaps their quality of care is not up to the standards of public health, I mean,
That's probably about all we can say about it, because this isn't on the agenda tonight.
All right.
Councilor Brenner?
Okay, this is just a question, not talking about this issue, but is it possible for us to pass an ordinance that would say until they receive their state license, they are not allowed to operate in Newport Beach?
Well, that really comes down to an enforcement issue. So it wouldn't really be at the direction of the council. It's more of a code enforcement issue and an enforcement issue.
So then code enforcement could be instructed to shut them down before they have a license?
Well, the council can instruct code enforcement to do that.
No, we don't, but code could.
They could. They could follow up and take action, but you're really talking about a limited window. So if you go to, let's say you filed an injunction, you go to court, and we go to court and we say, Judge, give us a temporary restraining order, give us an injunction, shut this facility down. And then the person who we're going up against, they come in and they say, Your Honor, I'm in the process. All the delays are the city's fault because they haven't given me my fire clearance, or it's the state's fault because they won't come out and inspect my facility. Traditionally, typically from what I've seen over my 20 years of experience dealing with litigation, is that judge is going to say to them, okay, well, let's come back in 30 days and see where we're at. So we have a very limited window that you're talking about here. It's from basically applying for the state license and getting the state license. And typically that's a very short window. Now, because of COVID and some of the other issues that have gone over the last year, that's sort of stretched out. But traditionally, that's not been a very long window. It's a very short period of time. And this isn't on the agenda, so I would feel very uncomfortable talking anymore about this.
Should we put it on a future agenda to discuss an ordinance where there could be a standing ordinance that nobody could operate before they get their license?
Perhaps we can talk about this after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll have the opportunity under the council policy. You can still put things on the agenda, but maybe we can talk about it after the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, any other public comments on agenda or non-agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we'll return back to the original order. Well, let's discuss potential regulation and education and outreach related to electric bikes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight we have Brad Summers, Lieutenant Little with us, and Joseph Meeks from the Attorney's Office to give this discussion as a follow-up if you would like some more information and discussion on regulation potential, regulations, education, outreach we're doing. I also want to mention that Michelle Bartos is from our school district board here tonight. She's in the back. They have an interest in this. We did ask the operator-owner of Pedigree Bikes to come. He did meet with the staff, but he was planning on coming, but he couldn't make the meeting. So we are hoping to have some local expertise for you. So with that, I'll turn over to Brad, and he can open the presentation for you.
Go. Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. As Dave mentioned, I'm Brad Summers, a Principal Civil Engineer within your Public Works Department. And we are returning to talk about electric bicycles. This was part of a June 28th request from Diane Dixon as an A1 item that was approved. With me this evening is Lieutenant Eric Little from our Police Department. He'll join me on the presentation, and we will talk, or he'll be able to provide some information on the great work the Police Department's been doing. And as Dave mentioned, we have Joseph Meeks, our Deputy City Attorney from your City Attorney's Office. So in talking about electric bicycles, we've had quite a few conversations, and I think at this point we understand the concerns and the issues primarily related to the younger riders, that age 12 to 14, and some of those behavioral issues we're seeing while they're riding. So we wanted to focus a little bit more on regulations and some of the enforcement activities that have been going on. So the state of California in 2015 became the first state to identify an electric bicycle and come up with their classification system, which we'll talk about a little more on the next slide. And it's important to know that as part of the electric bicycle definition, it is a unique device. It's not considered a motorized vehicle. So that kind of changed the way the California Vehicle Code looked at it. It is a bicycle, so it must have pedals, and with that it gets similar rights and rules as traditional bicyclists. And it does have a cap on the size of the motor. So the motor has a maximum amount of power for it to be considered an electric bicycle. As mentioned, there are 3 classifications within California law. We'll talk about that in a moment. And we talk about helmets a lot, or we hear a lot about helmets. One of the state laws that relates to the subject is all cyclists, whether you're on a traditional bicycle or an electric bicycle, is required to wear a helmet if they're under the age of 18. And then when we talk about the classifications, the higher speed bicycles, which is the class 3 or electric bicycle, you're required to wear a helmet regardless of your age. We also see a lot of bicycles going around now with multiple passengers on it. The California Vehicle Code does restrict it to mostly single passengers unless the bicycle is designed for more. And along with motor vehicles, the California Vehicle Code prohibits riding while under the influence of a controlled substance. So, talking about the classification system for electric bicycles, again, California was the first to come up with this. We have 3 classes, 1, 2, and 3. Classes 1 and 2 are similar in that they have a maximum power-assisted speed of 20 miles per hour. And what that means is the motor will continue to apply power to the user up until 20 miles per hour. It can go faster, but that's going to be on the cyclist to pedal it beyond that point. Also, what they have in common is Class 1 and Class 2 can be restricted per the California Vehicle Code. So the city has the option to restrict or prohibit the use of these devices, 1 and 2 again, from certain facilities such as sidewalks and multi-use trails. Now, where they differ is the Class 1 is a pedal-assisted bicycle, meaning you need to be pedaling in order for that motor to be providing you that extra boost, whereas a Class 2 is a throttle bicycle. So that means it has some sort of throttle, usually on the handlebars, that allows you to do it without pedaling. Class 3 is in a separate category to where it's considered a speed pedal-assisted electric bicycle. That's generally a higher speed, and it can go up to 28 miles per hour, and then this would be a pedal-assisted only, so there's not a throttle version of a Class 3 bicycle. There are additional rules regarding Class 3 within the California Vehicle Code. First and foremost, they are already prohibited from sidewalks, paths, and trails, or multi-use paths. You must be 16 or older to ride a Class 3 electric bicycle, and all users, as I mentioned, are required to wear helmets. We do have some city regulations as well that apply to cycling within the city. They'll also apply to electric bicycles. We have our city sidewalk cycling ordinance and resolution. This not only, it prohibits cycling throughout the city on sidewalks, but we do have a resolution that allows or accepts a few locations where you can ride on the sidewalk, and really the intent of this was to connect gaps within our bicycling network. We have our Oceanfront Boardwalk Safety Program, which identifies the rules of the road, establishes our 8-mile-per-hour speed limit. It defines unsafe operation and prohibits it. And as you may recall, we recently updated that to include all users, and the intent of that was to include electric bicycles and other new and emerging technologies as they come out. We also have a voluntary resident bicycle license program. This is something the police department runs, and the intent really of this is to register the bicycle, more or less, and it really aids in the theft recovery. So if somebody's bicycle goes missing, it's recovered. The police department, if it was licensed, would have the identification number and be able to reunite it with its owner. And we're not moving forward. Dave, can you move us a slide, please?
Good evening. Like it was mentioned, I'm Lieutenant Eric Little. I oversee the traffic division with the police department. For the next few slides, what I'm going to do is provide some data as far as the rate of accidents that we've been seeing on our roads and sidewalks, as well as some of the efforts the police department has been putting forth in addressing e-bikes. So real quick, what I wanted to do is kind of recap our traffic division, the resources that we have available to us. I think it's important to understand the resources that are out there. So the one lieutenant is me overseeing the whole division. We have 2 sergeants that oversee 2 different separate entities in traffic. And on top of that, we have a traffic investigator who stays indoors, and he investigates serious traffic collisions and crimes related to traffic like hit and runs. We have 3 hybrid traffic investigators and motorcycle officers. So they split their time between being in the field and then also spending time in the station investigating some of those collisions. Each of those are assigned or tasked with a special area of expertise. They're mentioned there. There's one who's a drug recognition expert, one who's an expert in street racing or modified vehicles, and another who's an expert in e-bikes. In addition to that, we have 7 motorcycle officers whose primary function is to be out on the roads conducting traffic enforcement. They're responsible for school safety and traffic enforcement around the schools and investigation of traffic collisions. And lastly, we recently entered into agreement with the Boardwalk ambassadors. So they're really an integral part of our enforcement efforts and our education efforts down on the peninsula and on the Oceanfront Boardwalk. Typically, they'll have two-person teams that are deployed, and their hours are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and their job is to educate the users of the Oceanfront Boardwalk on the rules and regulations on the boardwalk.
Lieutenant, can I just ask a quick, if you go back to the previous slide, on terms of the officer support, what happened to the Peninsula Enforcement Team?
So they are still out there. They're not part of the traffic division, so this is more focusing on just the resources in the traffic division. But we do have 3 officers assigned to the Peninsula Enforcement Team as well as a supervisor, and their job is to just focus on the peninsula in the Oceanfront Boardwalk area.
But they're also looking at e-bike
Correct.
enforcement. Are there any other officers outside the traffic division that would be involved?
Yeah, so daily we deploy our patrol officers who are driving in cars, and their job is traffic enforcement, but as well as responding to calls for service. Where the traffic division, our primary function is the traffic enforcement. So the patrol officers in cars can do dual roles and do both, but primarily the traffic division is going to focus on traffic type violations.
And the Peninsula Enforcement Team, do you know their hours of operation? Are they on the peninsula for 7 days a week?
I believe they're working 4 days a week, and their hours are roughly, I think they start at 9 or 10 in the morning and go until about 1 or 2 in the evening or into the early morning hours.
Okay, all right, thank
And
you.
that may depend based on the time of year. When it's summertime, they'll be out later at night because the bars are crowded. During winter months, their hours may adjust a little bit, and they try to deploy appropriately based on the time of year.
All right, thank you.
Eric, I just wanted to mention that we receive quite a few complaints about the ambassadors. So is that being re-looked at and evaluated as to whether that's an effective use of our resources or not?
Yeah, so it's coming up in a couple slides from now. I'll talk about the number of contacts that they make on the boardwalk, and then I'll also provide some data in terms of the number of collisions we're seeing down there, and we'll will show that in 2022 year-to-date, there's been a decrease in the number of collisions on the boardwalk, so I do believe they're having an effect down there. I'm not aware of the complaints that have been received, but I do think it's an effective tool to have.
Okay, thank you.
So in this slide, in 2021, we had, these are bicycle collisions, so this pertains to all bicycles. This is not just unique to e-bikes. It's both e-bikes and manual bicycles, and they're reported collisions. So that means it was reported to the police department, and a police officer went out and took a report. If somebody falls on a bike and gets up and rides away, that wouldn't be reported to us, and so that's not reflected in these numbers. So in 2021, we had 126 bicycle collisions throughout the city, and you can see the bar graph on the left shows the months, how many collisions we had, and then the graphic on the right shows where the collisions occurred. And really, they're happening throughout the city where you would expect to see them, where the bicycles frequent, which is the peninsula, but it's also Coast Highway, around the schools, and some of the other trails throughout the city that are used by bicyclists. Year to date for 2022, we've had 59 total collisions involving bicycles. Again, this is total bicycles. This is not just unique to e-bikes, but it's total bicycles, and again, it's reported bicycle collisions. As you can see on the map, it seems like it's less occurring on the peninsula, but we have clusters around some of our schools, Ensign and Newport Harbor, as well as CDM High School, but then we do have some down on Coast Highway and on the peninsula. This is a graph that depicts year-to-date bicycle collisions from January 1st to August 10th. So each year is the same date range. It goes up to August 10th, and if you start at the left side of the screen, it goes all the way back to 2015, where we saw 65 collisions year-to-date. And if you progress and we look at 2022, year-to-date, we've only had 59 collisions. In the last 2 years, in 2020 and 2021, we did see a large increase. And I think a lot of that is attributed to COVID and the fact that people were outdoors more on bicycles and looking for other avenues of entertainment. So that's why I believe that we saw a spike during that time. In addition to that, the Boardwalk ambassadors did not go into effect until early to mid 2021. So I think that that is also attributed to why we've seen a decrease in bicycle collisions.
Could you take a stab at when we started seeing electric bikes show up more?
I think in the last year and a half, we've really seen kind of an explosion of them. Dawn from Pedigo, who spoke at a Speak Up Newport event, showed some sales data, which was really interesting to see. But I think about the last year and a half is when we've really seen a large increase in the number of them, as well as the complaints that come in from the public.
2020, 2021, basically.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it would be helpful, maybe we'll do this in our action at the summary, to segregate the bike collision data, just so we know what is e-bike driven and what is regular bike driven. I just think it's just a good data point. Is that possible?
So it's challenging. It's possible, but it's challenging. And the reason being, and you'll probably hear this in the theme as we go along, is that e-bikes are new, and it's the last year and a half, 2 years. And so a lot of things have not caught up to the e-bikes. So when we fill out a collision report, it's a state form from the California Highway Patrol, who puts boxes and they code everything. So that's how we can track a lot of things. They have not yet caught up with e-bikes to have an easy way of tracking it, to just make a checkbox that it's e-bikes. We could manually go through and review and read all the reports because it would be detailed in there. But again, it's just a time-consuming function. We don't have an easy way of coding the e-bikes. Now, going forward, that could be something that we could institute. It's easier going forward than it would be going backward.
All right, that's good. What about the nature of these collisions? Do we have any data on the seriousness of the injury?
Yeah, in reviewing most of the collisions, most of them are minor in nature. Typically, with a bike collision, we don't see no injuries, and the reason being is because if somebody's uninjured on a bike, typically they get up and ride away. They don't want to be involved with the police department. Now, when we respond to the injuries, a lot of the injuries are minor. Sometimes it's complaint of pain, sometimes it's abrasions or small lacerations. We're required to document a traffic collision, and a bicycle being involved in a collision is a traffic collision. We're required to document when there's any injuries. So from complaint of pain on up to the most severe injuries. So most of them are minor in nature.
Well, I was just going to maybe say, because they're reported, maybe they're more than minor. I mean, if they're minor, they get up and ride away.
They could be, yes, but most of them, in going through from experience and reading reports, and specifically the boardwalk collisions that we'll talk about in a couple slides, I think 10 out of the 11 were just minor in nature. They had abrasions or they had a cut, nothing serious.
So just looking at this chart, the 59 year-to-date is 75. Are the prior years, are those year-to-date as of August?
Yes,
They're not
equal,
full year?
Correct, equal timeframes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, equal time frame. So 75 and 75.
So
Only
yeah, it
12
was,
months comparable to this 12-month mark.
all the years are from January 1st to August 10th.
Okay, great.
So it does show, and I averaged the numbers out earlier today. The average across all those years dating back to 2015 is 62 per year, so we're a couple below average at this point. And here at Oceanfront Boardwalk, so in 2021, we had 11 reported collisions on the boardwalk. 7 of those collisions involved e-bikes. And again, 10 of the 11 involved very minor injuries, abrasions or scrapes and bruises. There was one that was a reported loss of consciousness. However, that person made a full recovery. And in 2022, so this is year to date, we've had 4 reported collisions on the boardwalk, and only one of those involved an e-bike. So again, as we mentioned or talked about earlier, I think the boardwalk ambassadors are really having a positive impact on the number of collisions down there. And if you see, we started recording data and specifically extrapolating how many advisals they're making for e-bikes compared to manual bikes. So in Q1 of this year, from January to March, they made 632 contacts for speeding bikes. Now, this speeding that's their visual estimation of a speeding bike. And the boardwalk has a speed limit of 8 miles per hour. So this is them thinking that somebody's going over 8 miles an hour and contacting them. So that first quarter, 400 of the 632 were for e-bikes. In Q2, April to June of this year, they've made 1,144 contacts for speeding bikes, and 727 of those were for e-bikes. I think an obvious conclusion as to why there's a greater number is because of it being summertime and there's more people using the boardwalk during that time.
Yes.
Another question. Okay, I've had this question, I've presented this before, but just to restate it. So 632 in the first quarter, 1,144 for speeding bikes. Let's just talk about speeding bikes, regular bikes, manual bikes, e-bikes. Do we have the data, you call them contacts, so they've been stopped, is that right, or just observed? Have they been stopped?
So for the boardwalk ambassadors, that's them making contact with them and
All right.
asking them
and
to slow
could you
down.
explain what happens next? Because they're not being cited, or they're not being warned, and there's no police involved. You're just getting a report from the ambassadors. Could you talk about the enforcement of speeding bikes on the boardwalk?
Yeah, and then a couple slides from now, I'll have a slide about our efforts when it comes to education and enforcement.
What about speeding is, according to the sign in a previous slide, it says no speeding, speed limit is 8 miles per hour. How are we enforcing that?
Yeah, I do have that information in a couple slides from now.
All
So the boardwalk is a little bit tricky when it comes to enforcing speed. So to give you an example, if a motorcycle officer is enforcing speed on Coast Highway, for example, they typically park on the side of the road, they see a speeding vehicle. Well, when that speeding vehicle passes, they're able to accelerate and go very fast and maneuver through traffic. The challenge with the boardwalk is that when you see a speeding bike, and either you do it from visual estimation or you do it through a LiDAR device, I can't send a motorcycle officer to speed down the boardwalk on a motorcycle to catch that violator because that would be unsafe. So it's working our traffic division in conjunction with our peninsula enforcement team, like you mentioned earlier, in using some of our off-road vehicles that can go on the sand, but also have to be kind of a dedicated enforcement effort out there to usually work in teams. And if we see somebody who's going on the boardwalk, to then radio to another officer, that, hey, there's a group coming up, and I visually estimated their speed to be in excess of 8 miles an hour, and then a stop's made. So it becomes a little bit more tricky on the boardwalk to conduct enforcement with officers because of the nature of the geography down there.
All right, do we actually have a process where the ambassadors can radio to the Peninsula Enforcement Team and say, there are like 25 bikes headed your way? Do we have any kind of communication that way?
I'm not aware whether or not they have communication, regular communication with our officers. They obviously have the number for our dispatch line where they could call it in, but I apologize, I'm not aware of whether
All right,
or not they
well,
have
I'm
regular-
just, and I appreciate that, Eric. I'm not I'm just trying to find ways where we can improve on the current system.
Yeah.
So, for example, I like your example of a motor officer who's sitting by the side of the road and the speeding car goes by and they go issue a citation. Part of the benefit of that is that it becomes a deterrent to other cars driving and speeding and potentially speeding, and therefore it becomes a deterrent. I believe we could use the same deterrent principle on the boardwalk if occasionally, we can't get everyone, and we don't get every speeder, I get that. But if bicycle riders, manual or e-bikes, see that people are speeding and being cited with tickets, not warnings, that may be an effective deterrent. What is your opinion about that?
Yeah, I agree. And again, I probably should have put this slide up in advance because it may have answered or shown some of the efforts. But we do think enforcement is an excellent tool, and some people don't learn by education. We just know that. I have 2 small boys. Sometimes you need a little bit of enforcement in your life. So we've tried to publicize the events that we've done, and I will talk about one where we put out a press release where we're really trying to publicize that we're out there doing enforcement. We're posting on social media pictures of our officers out there writing tickets. Because it is a dual approach of education and enforcement. So we have to have kind of dedicated events, and we've done that, and we will continue to do that when it comes down to enforcement, because you do need both.
All right, I'll be patient and wait till you bring up those slides.
Okay.
Thank you.
So education, what we've done. In the school year last year, 2021 and 2022, education's a big component, and we do see younger and younger kids that are operating these e-bikes, and a lot of that comes with inexperience. So we think they need some proper education when it comes to rules of road and how to properly operate bicycles and be a pedestrian using crosswalks and lights. Last year, we presented to over 1,100 Ensign Middle School students and staff, 350 Mariners Elementary School student and staff, and then at different community meetings, about 300 members of the public. And as we continue, we've done additional efforts through Speak Up Newport events, continuous student outreach, and other social media videos and posts. Enforcement, on May 7th and May 15th, that's Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Awareness Month. We have a grant through the Office of Traffic Safety that provides funding for us to go out and do enforcement. So we had 2 days where we targeted bicycle and pedestrian safety type violations. And here we go, the thing I wish I would have put on a few slides earlier, e-bike traffic safety operations. So on July 9th, the Traffic Division, in connection with the Peninsula Enforcement Team, put out a press release about our efforts in advance of what we were going to do. During that enforcement effort, which was just several hours throughout the day, we contacted 198 boardwalk users. 82 of those contacts were juveniles. 60 citations and warnings were issued. And most of those were actual citations. So we have the option sometimes to write a written warning that has the same appearance of somebody getting a ticket, but a majority of those were actual citations. 55 of those were to bike riders, and 12 of those were to juveniles. In addition, January 1st to August 10th, now this is total violations, but showing the work that our motorcycle officers do, they've issued 3,202 citations throughout the city.
Yes.
All right, good. That's great news. Do you know what the fine is for a citation?
So it's established through the court system. Usually there's a base fine amount that's around $20, $25, and then through other fees and fines, it sometimes gets up to $200 or $300. I do believe that a lot of those citations that were issued on the boardwalk were for the municipal code of unsafe operation on the boardwalk. So that would be a fine that's established through our city. I think that fine is about $100.
Mr. Harp, do you know what that fine is?
Joseph Meeks from our office has that information, but the vehicle code limits the amount of fines for when you basically oppose them through the municipal code, even though it's under our code, the vehicle code does limit the fine. So, Mr. Meeks, if you could tell us what the fines are for a first violation.
So the vehicle code allows the city to adopt its own fines if it wants, or it can use the fines that are already in the vehicle code. The vehicle code does limit the fines that we can impose, and it depends on what the violation is. So, for example, I think if you're riding without a helmet, I think it's like $10, or maybe $25. I think it's $25 with no helmet, $10 if the bicycle doesn't have the correct license placard on it. And then the maximum you can do is $100 which is what would be in our code. We have $100 for infractions. So that would be consistent with what the vehicle code allows.
Okay, thank you. There may be an opportunity to adjust that. And one other question on enforcement. Do the ambassadors stop the riders and engage? Or because I've heard reports, and maybe we'll hear from residents, that the ambassadors will attempt and then the riders keep going. So what kind of physical contact, or are they just observing the riders as they go by?
Well, there's no physical contact between them, but they will ask them to stop, and they will try to educate them on the rules.
Suppose they don't stop.
They're not going to try to detain them in any way, no.
But do they kind of flag them down? I mean, that's the physical contact. I mean, I don't mean that they're holding them, but do they ask them to stop?
Right. They'll ask them to stop. They'll educate them. Sometimes they have some educational pamphlets that they'll provide them. A lot of what we do, as well as the Boardwalk ambassadors, is we seek voluntary compliance from people. Now, of course, we have a little bit more ability to go out and actually detain people and enforce that, and people are going to be more apt to stop for the police department than somebody who's from the Boardwalk ambassador crew. But they do get a lot of voluntary compliance from the public. A lot of them are visitors not from the area, and they're not trying to do the wrong thing. They're just enjoying the area, and so when they're asked to stop or hold up for a second, we see some compliance from them.
Okay, one other question. I'm just looking at the data. So 198 Boardwalk users were contacted. I mean, I think I've seen the reports from the ambassador that there were 600 stopped. I mean, so is it 198 or is it 660? How does this data get?
So that was for one day, July 9th. That was 198 people were contacted on that day. For the Boardwalk ambassador, that was for a whole quarter, but that was also, they have other functions too. It's not just stopping bikes. This day, we were trying to be a little bit heavy-handed, for lack of better terms.
And I love it. I'm glad we did this. But 200 Boardwalk users, we have to just make an assumption. I'll speculate that there were more than 200 speeding electric bikes on the boardwalk on that particular summer day.
I don't know that that's a safe assumption. I was out there for the first couple hours of the morning, and it was pretty slow in the morning. And the area I was positioned was down by the Balboa Pier, and it was pretty thin traffic at that time. I was there until about 11 o'clock in the morning. It may have picked up as the day went on.
I think it picks up. When I'm out there in the afternoon, it's like the San Diego Freeway. But
yeah.
All right. But I'm just wondering about 198 Boardwalk. It just seems thin.
Yeah, and I don't know if that is, I don't know if they saw lots more. I would venture to guess that they stopped everybody that they could that day. That was the instruction, and that was the goal, and that was the efforts that we were trying to do.
I'm happy to hear that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So education and enforcement moving forward, we're going to continue with the efforts that we've done. We've seen some positive impacts from the education and the enforcement efforts. In fact, today, we have an officer who's presenting again to this school year for Ensign Middle School during the PE period. They're going to reach approximately 1,000 students during that education campaign. And something unique that we're seeing at Ensign Middle School is the principals instituted a safety sticker program, which you can see a picture of the sticker that they're passing out. So at the conclusion of that event, the students have to take a test based on the presentation they were just given. They have to score an 80% or better on the test, and then they're given a safety sticker that has to be applied to their helmet or to their bicycle, and that is their ticket to be able to park their bicycle on campus. So it's trying to get that education into everybody that we can, and we'll talk a little bit, Brad will, about some further partnerships with the school district that we're working on and continuing to try to get that education out to the students. In addition to that, we plan to conduct several town hall style meetings at the schools and also potentially other forums like here at the community room to reach members of the public and the community. And then lastly, we're going to conduct additional e-bike traffic safety operations where that's going to be a heavy enforcement focus again. So it's always two prongs, it's education and it's enforcement. As we start with school, started this week, what we want to do is we want to focus on the schools, but also the boardwalk. So we don't have specific dates ironed out just yet, but in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will publicize our next enforcement operation dates that will be at the schools and on the Oceanfront Boardwalk.
All right, I'll give the lieutenant a break here for a second. actions taken by other cities, I think we realize that the electric bicycle proliferation really isn't just a Newport Beach issue. I've been involved in some national organizations that have been looking at this as well, and the West Coast is definitely ahead of the curve. And I think Orange County is probably right at the peak of that. So with that in mind, we like to look at what the other agencies are doing. I've highlighted a few that have taken some action. The first being San Clemente, they developed an education outreach program which built upon electric bicycles or focused on them specifically and targeted the younger riders. The sheriff, along with their school district, performs education engagement very similar to what the lieutenant was talking about, which was just done today at Ensign, including a safety sticker program that allows them to focus directly at those students that are riding into the school. And then in 2022, earlier this year, they actually moved to prohibit electric bicycles. That's Class 1 and Class 2, as we talked about earlier. Class 3 are already prohibited per state code. They prohibited them from their beachfront trail. Moving on to Carlsbad. Carlsbad actually already prohibits all bicycles from their sidewalks, but they took action similar to what we did on the Oceanfront. They redefined the users to be regulated mobility devices. And that, like our Oceanfront action we took earlier, is to ensure that electric bicycles and other emerging technologies are included within that definition. And they added in rules of the road. Again, similar to what we've done on the Oceanfront, but to try and guide the users that are in the city riding their bicycles to proper use. And then they implemented what they're calling a ticket diversion or education program. And essentially what this is an option that's run through their judicial system and their police department to where if someone is cited, it gives, depending on the violation, could give that the option of taking an education class. Again, focusing at those that may have violated or didn't know and need the extra education, as opposed to having to pay the violation or, again, going through the judicial system. San Diego prohibits motorized transportation devices, which is their term, again, all-encompassing as we did with our Oceanfront, including electric bicycles on their beach and bay trails. That was recent, but I was not able to track down how recent it was. Huntington Beach is taking a different stance. They've chosen to focus more on their established speed limits on their beachfront trails and kind of target enforcement on that. That's what that sign depicts. In one of theirs, they actually have a 5 mile per hour zone when the pedestrian area is heavy and then 10 miles per hour when it isn't. And they've been operating a ticket diversion program for many years. I believe it initially started in the 70s or 1970s and then has been revamped as late as 2016 into the current system. And then good news for us in the engineering world, the Orange County Transportation Authority, and working with them, realizes too that this is not just a local issue. So we're working to kick off some regional working groups that we'll be sure to have a seat front and center with. So when we talk about the limitations, again, the state primarily set the rules and regulations for electric bicycles, and with that, we're limited on what we can do to change those rules and regulations. So in short, the state code has to give us authorization to amend or change them. So within this, and considering what we have, it's a bit of a short list that the code lets us do when it comes to electric bicycles. The first, as we've talked about, is we can move forward with restrictions on Class 1 and 2 electric bicycles. Again, those are the 20 mile per hour e-bikes. To certain paths and trails, primarily sidewalks and multi-use trails. The converse, we could actually allow Class 3 bicycles. Again, the state code already prohibits them from those sidewalks and multi-use trails, but we could allow it if we chose to. And then we could establish a bicycle licensing program that could require and restrict operation of unlicensed bicycles in public right-of-way. Now, this isn't licensing the user like a driver's license, is actually licensing the device itself, but it would be limited to Newport Beach residents only. So with that, and moving into some of the potential actions, first and foremost, and starting more with the low-hanging fruit, would be to update the city cycling safety website. I've toured several other websites from other agencies, and I think this is a place that we could easily have a benefit, and it allows us as staff or as the ambassadors to point back at the city website for more information. We've heard Lieutenant Little talk about all the work the police department's been doing. We want to encourage that to keep moving forward with their education outreach campaign. And then item 3 is something that recently has gotten a lot of traction, and And I'll step back and say, over the years, we've talked a lot about cycling safety, and especially with electric bicycles. And it's always kind of felt like the city was pushing it and trying to do it on our own. But as recently as the past couple weeks, we have had great conversations with members of the school district, with the Harbor Council that helps with all the Newport Mesa parent-teacher administration, as well as shop owners and community members. For instance, Pedigo, who's in the house tonight and going to be able to talk later if they choose to. So this has been great. We finally have a group of people that are interested from different versions, kind of a public-private partnership that we could work towards better education and even work within the schools, hopefully, and that's the goal, to better educate our students. We could also update the city cycling ordinance. It is a bit old. It was last done in 1982, and of course the city looks quite a bit different than it did back then. But one of the items that we could do is we could put in some of the rules of the roads type regulations like we have in the Oceanfront Safety Program, and this would allow our enforcement teams to engage those users if they should be violating rules or not behaving properly. We could consider a ticket diversion program, and again, we've talked about that. That would provide that option to the citation for maybe a more focused education to those violators. And then to advocate the state to impose an age or education requirements related to electric bicycles. And as we mentioned, California was the first state in 2015 to adopt electric bicycle regulations and legislation. Since then, there's been 37 states that have kind of followed our model. A few, or two of them, have actually decided that there's a minimum age to all electric bicycles, not just Class 3. That's Minnesota and Utah. But beyond that, there's definitely a lacking area in education. I think you've seen that theme come up over and over in this presentation. So this is somewhere where it'd be more at the state level, but something that we could advocate for. A few other items we hear quite a bit about that we wanted to talk about, that we gave some consideration to. The first would be some sort of speed limiting device on the electric bicycle or a geofencing technology that could either limit where they go or throttle back the speeds. And in talking with our partners at the bike shops and the manufacturers, the technology is really limited to do this, and we've heard it can actually be easily modified. And beyond that, it's something that we don't feel as a city we could require those devices to have. Again, I think this is a higher level decision than the city has the ability to do, and it would be something even if we were able to, would be within Newport Beach, and of course we have a lot of visitors that bring bicycles in as well. We talked about licensing electric bicycles. This is something that the vehicle code would allow us to do temporarily, possibly. But that would apply to electric and traditional bicycles should we choose to require a bicycle license. Again, you'd be licensing the device, not the user. And with that, we could restrict locations that they'd be at. But again, all bicycles, so we couldn't target just electric bicycles. And in our city attorney's view of it, it would only apply to Newport Beach residents. And of course, we have a lot of visitors that come to the city and enjoy our city by bike or on two wheels. And there's also a proposed state legislation that looks to remove the authorization for this. So this could be some, if it moved forward, could only be in place for potentially for a short period of time. And then the last item is to prohibit Class 1 and 2 electric bicycles on the sidewalks, multi-use trails such as the Oceanfront. Again, the vehicle code gives the city authorization to do that with the Class 1 and 2, and to say it again, Class 3 are already prohibited per the state code. But we've heard from the other cities that have tried this, compliance is low, and it's really, really heavily dependent on enforcement. So that is an enforcement item. We do note that it would limit the mobility. We have a lot of users that like to use our paths and trails as opposed to the streets. They can be legally on the streets, but that's a consideration. And then when we talked about this, it was brought up at council, I believe it was 2020, we talked about prohibiting electric bicycles on the oceanfront, and at the time, there really wasn't consensus from the community. We heard from both sides pretty strongly, so that would be something we'd want to really talk with the public about should we choose to go that way. That's it for the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, Pedigo had generously offered to host an educational forum, which I'm going to A1 this evening, to be sponsored by the city using city location first with police education resources and Pedigo specialist. And we'd like to invite the Newport Mesa School District to also participate in 2 other seminars or studies, I should say courses, at the different high schools. So that was my plan to do that, and Grace wanted me to wait until the study session to ask for that. So I personally believe in education. I think that'll be helpful, and we'll open up for comments from council on the other proposals. Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I do support all your proposed actions. It's about focus on education, updating the website, education, youth education, the rules of the road, I like that, and have a ticket diversion program. I mean, that's positive and constructive. And maybe we lobby the state on some state requirements. I do want to just have some follow-up questions. What about scooters on the boardwalk or anywhere? The 3-wheeled scooters, electric scooters, what are we doing about that? I mean, it said on the no sign, no scooters. Are we enforcing electric scooters and skateboards? There are electric skateboards now.
Yeah, I apologize. Lieutenant Carpentier might be a better person to answer that question, as he's the Area 1 commander. So I haven't received many complaints from my office in the traffic division about scooters, nor have I seen accidents pertaining to scooters. So I don't really have a good answer for you.
Well, we've gotten letters, and basically that they're weaving in and out. But well, maybe we'll hear from the residents. Also, when you mentioned Huntington Beach's enforcement, could you describe what they do in Huntington Beach in terms of enforcement? Did they do anything differently than what we're doing?
No, I think that it's very similar. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish relationships with, we see that other cities we're all trying to do what's best for the safety of the people that are living or visiting our city and their city. So it's trying to make sure that we're collaborating and we're reaching out to those agencies. We did reach out to them about their bicycle safety education that they've been doing, trying to get ideas. And I think that this Orange County Transportation Authority committee that they're trying to put together is going to be very beneficial, so we can all come to the table with our ideas and not duplicate efforts.
That would be very good. One other question. 2 Sundays ago, I saw the largest of what we're seeing of this phenomena of bike clubs. I'm sure you're aware of this coming into our city, and I don't know, I assume they're going down the peninsula. I was actually driving north on PCH right around the river, and it must have been, I mean, my guess, 1,000 bicycles coming into the city. That was around noontime on Sunday, a week ago, I guess it was. And then about 3 hours later, when I was coming back into the city, they're all leaving. Were you aware of this? Was the police, I don't know, you personally, was the police aware, traffic control? And what are we doing about these bike clubs? It's regular bikes, e-bikes, but they're taking over PCH and perhaps local streets.
So we've seen it from time to time. We haven't had advance notice of their intentions to come to the city. We have had that, fortunately, sometimes with car clubs because they post on social media and we're able to intercept some of those messages and be prepared. But we have seen it for the last few weekends, these bike clubs to come into town. Typically, other than taking over the road and kind of going where they shouldn't, they're not really causing any other issues as far as crimes, or they're not being malicious in other ways. So kind of one thought process is to get them in the city and get them out, and kind of, the sooner they leave the city, the better for us. But we did, this last weekend, we did have the club come through. I know we stopped several of them and issued some citations for different violations that were observed. So it's something that we may see more of, and we'll continue to be prepared and better address it as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Dixon, scooters are banned from the boardwalk as well as skateboards.
Yes, I know. It's on the not permitted, but how are we enforcing against that? So skateboards, and now they're motorized skateboards and motorized scooters.
Yeah, it would be the same way as we have in years past. The difference is we have not seen, at least I have not seen or been aware of a large change in the complaints or the number of accidents from scooters or skateboards on the boardwalk. They've always been there, and the enforcement's been dealt with the same way it has through the Peninsula Enforcement Team and our Peninsula officers that are assigned down there.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bear.
Eric, I was interested on your slide that showed the statistics. At the end of it, it said that there were 65 interactions with these bicyclists, and only 12 of them were juveniles. So in your experience or from what you're hearing, how many of them are there a significant number of adults that are speeding and not obeying the rules?
So I think it depends on the area of the city we're talking about, and we see a lot of the juvenile issues around our schools for obvious reasons around Ensign and Corona Del Mar High School. On the boardwalk, I would say you probably see more adults, more people that are over 18 that are using the boardwalk and electric bikes. But it is a mix, and it just kind of depends on the area of the city.
What about intoxication? Is that a problem?
Always a problem.
Yeah.
We haven't seen any statistics to show that there's a large issue correlating intoxication with the e-bikes. But of course, anytime you take any substance that impairs your judgment or your wherewithal and you're operating a bike or a car, obviously there's an additional layer of danger. But we have not seen a large percentage of DUI-related
Are
collisions.
tickets comparable to what you get for driving if you are operating a bicycle?
Yeah, it could be, depending on the violation. So if you were a bicycle and you were riding a bicycle down Irvine Avenue and you didn't stop at a stop sign, it would be the same thing as if you were driving a car and not stopping at a stop sign.
And Kevin, I'm thinking that somehow we should target our older citizens with education as well as just our students. Not the kids are getting, some of them are getting the messages, but some of the older ones aren't.
Yeah, maybe we could do another one at Oasis as well. I was picturing it was one here at City Hall, and then we could do one at Oasis and one at the schools, each school.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other requests to speak from the dais, let's go out to the public on this. Public comments, please come forward.
Hi there. I want to thank Officer Little and Mr. Summers for letting me come down here. He was referring to some of the updated community involvement, and I'm here representing, I'm the newly appointed safety chair for the Harbor Council PTA. So that's the 32 schools and the 19,000 students in the Newport Mesa School District. The PTA is the, Harbor Council PTA is the parent organization of all the PTAs of that school. Also a 20-year resident of Newport Beach and the parent of 2 kids in the Newport Mesa School District. But recently part of this became, because probably although I appreciate all of the concern and the energy around e-bikes, is the most important group of people that needs to make sure that this gets taken care of is the parents of the young kids that are riding the bikes. And so that's one of the things that we're doing, is figuring out how do we get the school district, the community, and the parents through the PTAs of the school districts to get more involved. So we've kicked off that last week. Corona Del Mar, we did a handout at the orientation of e-bike safety. Don from Pedigo gave us a whole bunch of books, and we gave out. We're meeting and starting a committee in which we're going to be meeting with both Newport Beach and police and city. We're reaching out to the Costa Mesa District, Police Department and City. We're working very closely with the Newport Mesa School District, and then also the Harbor PTA and the 2 major electric bike companies that are based here in Newport Beach, but also just dealing with general bike safety. And so I just want to make sure you know that there's a lot of energy around this now. We're taking a very active role in this. We're having our first Harbor Council PTA meeting with all the PTA presidents this coming Monday. This is a topic that we're going to be talking about and looking at how do we get the schools more involved in just education that's standardized, because it's great. There's a lot of energy around different schools doing different things, but how do we get a consistent way in which we're dealing with it through the schools, through education, helping the staff understand the issues? Do we register bikes as part of that education the same way we require permits for parking on campus? All kinds of great ideas, but how do we package them together and make sure that the school district is an active participant in this, and how can we help as parents? So there was a lot of Love Stats group. So I also sit on the board for the last 6 years for the Children's Hospital of Orange County. Obviously, they only see the very serious accidents that come in. And so I asked them to put together from their trauma center a update sheet, which we also handed out to parents, because I'm like, if we can't get you just because it's the right thing to do, maybe we can let you know that kids are getting hurt, seriously hurt, and that the statistics for what's happening with our young kids in both Costa Mesa, Orange County. Huntington Beach, by the way, is the top location for juvenile e-bike accidents. Newport Beach is only third. Not great, but at least we were talking about other cities are trying to do things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's leading to the results that we would like to see. So, and I have the stats if you want, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that, and we're educated that we are working, and we really appreciate the help that they're giving us in getting this started. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward. Oh, a bicycle rider himself.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosher. I don't know if you're going to do, as you sometimes do, invite the council members to go down the dais and each give direction to the staff on what they would like to see emphasis on. Personally, I think it would be good, as so far has been the case today, that the study session be confined to studying, and if you want to give direction, that be on a regular agenda item so that the public knows what you're going to be asked to give direction about. Of the options that you were presenting, I'm not sure if I heard it right, that the state is giving us a licensing option such that Newport Beach residents would be required to license their bike and could be apparently fined for not doing that. But riders outside of Newport Beach could come here and are immune to that requirement. That seems like a very strange system to me, so I would not favor that option. And then as to the boardwalk and the 8-mile-per-hour speed limit and the accidents that we have there, if I understood the staff presentation, they seem to be emphasizing that the accidents currently are not entirely driven by e-bikes, or not even strongly driven by e-bikes. And as Lieutenant Little said, people are not generally trying to do the wrong thing, but I can tell you as a bike rider, 8 miles per hour is a pretty slow speed to be going on a level area, such as the boardwalk. And I personally do not have a good sense of whether I'm going 7 or 9. And I again think it would be helpful to allow people who want to do the right thing to do the right thing, to put up some kind of speed indicators that flash and tell you when you're going over 8 miles per hour. And I think that might slow down the entire traffic and help with e-bikes as well. I understand the staff put up something at some time that told people if they're going, 10, 15, 20, and there was a contest to see if you could do that. That's a bad idea, but something flashing to tell you if you're going over 8 miles per hour and to say you're over the limit, slow down, I think would be helpful. And people would try to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward.
Mayor, City Council members, my name is Ken Rawson. Let me talk about e-bikes first. Newport Elementary School started this week, and I have the privilege of being able to walk daily with my current working schedule. And I noticed that I would call it an explosion of e-bikes for the parents that are bringing their children to school. There's a type of e-bike out there that's called a cargo bike that has a very nice seating arrangement for children on the back. And I counted 22 of them at Newport Elementary this week. There's more e-bikes with parents carrying their children to school than there are manual bikes now. Okay, another factoid about myself. I live on the Boardwalk, 1700 block. And in the last couple months, I've taken it on myself to do a little more deck sitting and watching of the bicycles. My independent survey, now the bikes that are on the boardwalk, over 50% of them are e-bikes. So we have an explosion that's happened on the boardwalk. It's out there, and it's in the city. Parents taking their kids to school, it's a fact. So we need to do something to decide how we're going to regulate speed. And I applaud what the city did this last July on Saturday. I think that has to be done more, because we've heard from the lieutenant, and we know from meetings we've had with Diane Dixon, the only way they can cite bikes and have it stand up in court for speeding is they have a motorized officer that has a radar gun. So our officers that are on bicycles doing the riding on the boardwalk, they can't issue tickets. They won't hold up in courts, so they don't issue tickets. So we have to think about that. And I think first ticket, send them to school, educate them. Second ticket, it's a fine. I don't know what you do about a third ticket, but the amount of time I walk on the boardwalk, I see the same young kids with their surfboards early in the morning at 7 o'clock, 6:30, hustling to get to the break to surf to get home before they go to school. And they're never doing less than 15 to 20 miles an hour. They're full bore because they're in a hurry. They're going to surf, they're going to come home. The other thing I'd like to point out is the ambassador program. I had the opportunity to follow some ambassadors because I wanted to see what I see on sitting on my deck is people riding by the ambassadors on their bikes way too fast and the ambassadors not stopping them. I see scooters going by the ambassadors. I see skateboards that are skateboards and electric skateboards going by the ambassadors, and no attempt for them to stop and talk to them. No, put their hand up, stop them, nothing. They're just talking to each other as they walk. So I thought, I'm going to follow a couple of them and ask them why they're not stopping them. And I sent you a letter that documented what I did, so I'm not going to take the time now. And the chief has that letter. So the ambassadors are not adhering to what the duties are. I'd like to request the city manager and our police chief, we should have a follow-up program where we're auditing the ambassadors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward. If there are multiple speakers, you can stand at opposing podiums.
Hi, I'm Michelle Bartow, president of Newport Mesa Unified School District. First off, I want to thank you guys so much for having this study session. It's something that we've been talking about at the district. It's great to see the partnership that we've been able to begin, and especially with the beginning of the school year. Things look a lot different around Ensign Middle School than they did a year ago, and that's really gratifying for me as a parent. And also Ms. Sentovich with Harbor Council PTA. We've got a lot of really great partnerships. I'm seeing in the way the kids ride on the streets, particularly those who are in the areas I'm mostly in, Ensign and Westcliff. A lot of them have taken to riding in groups, which is smart. You have packs of them going together, and I think that they're recognizing that they're more visible that way. So I see a lot of improvements in the way we've handled our education and our enforcement. One thing I think might be helpful for residents in the areas around the schools is particularly after breaks and coming back to school, if we could sort of make a concerted effort to let residents know, hey, school's back in session, you're going to see some erratic bike behavior for the next couple of weeks. Drive slowly, pay attention. And additionally, one thing that I've seen over and over again over here by Colonel Del Mar, as well as over by Ensign, is the traffic. The kids are really well behaved right around the schools, especially after the first couple weeks. What happens though is they get about 2 blocks away, and there's kind of a couple consistent areas where you see more serious accidents. There was one last summer. One of the neighborhood kids is currently working on through some issues regarding paralysis because of being hit in a crosswalk. And he was driving an e-bike. He was mostly following the rules, but e-bikes go so much faster that even if cars are stopping, there is a greater impact. So those sorts of things are stories that I hear from parents. So when I think of ways we can improve and do better is instead of just focusing on the areas directly around the schools, there's a couple areas within 2 blocks of the schools that are known to be more dangerous. Ms. Sentovich could tell you some as well over by CDM. Maybe beefing up support in those areas with police support, or even just, volunteers standing around and saying, hey guys, still pay attention in this area, I think would go a long way. Obviously, we're spreading the radius further, but I think what happens is kids on their bikes, they leave school, they're really good for about 5 minutes, and then they get going and they forget. So just doing what we can to kind of improve the lives of our kids. But I thank you so much for everything that's been happening. It's a really big improvement from a year ago. I can't overstate that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward. And you can stand at opposing podium, sir. Yes.
Hi, my name is Carmen Rosso. Regarding education, yes, Newport Elementary School should be a priority, as my husband mentioned earlier, has heavy boardwalk use, and also Newport Harbor High School. I noticed in the presentation, unless I misunderstood, that the police enforcement team and the ambassadors start at 9 a.m. Well, go to the boardwalk at 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m., and you will find lots of kids speeding because they don't want to get late to school, I guess. So they need to leave their house earlier. Regarding about the ambassadors and how many contacts they have made in the quarter, I would like to know how they keep track, because the ambassadors we have seen, they do not have flyers to hand out to educate people, and they do not have a notebook where they write down who they contact and for what reason. So how does statistics have been established? I would like to better understand that. There was an e-bike accident near our house on early June. A lady that was intoxicated, she fell down and the eyeball came out of her eye socket, and an ambulance came to get her. So yes, we do have some serious accidents. Many meetings ago, we had talked about improving the signs on the boardwalk, and that fizzled away, nothing happened. Rather than having a list of no's that nobody reads, no e-bikes, no whatever, having picture-type signs will be more beneficial. Instead of saying share the road, how about wait to pass, or other messages that will be more efficient. What happened to the idea of improving the signs? I haven't seen anything about that. I agree with Marie Cotton's suggestion to create a flyer. She suggests for that flyer to be given to the operators of short-term lodging establishments. I agree with that, but also there should be given to the residents. Many of the people that are breaking the law are the residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor Muldoon, rest of the council, thank you for your service. Also the city staff and Lieutenant Little, Brad, thank you everybody. I think this has been a constructive forum. My name's Cassidy, I'm from Pedigo Electric Bikes. Don asked me to be here today. He was very sorry he couldn't make it. I'm just here to reaffirm our commitment to being part of the solution. We take this very seriously, and we're looking forward to working with you going forward on a constructive basis. Thank you.
Hey, Cassidy. Yes.
Hi, I'm Maureen Cotton. I'm president of the Peer-to-Peer. I know most of you know that already. I want to say that I agree with Councilwoman Dixon regarding the deterrent effect of ticketing. So we do appreciate the July 9th exercise, but it needs to be something that's exercised on a regular basis. I personally disagree with notifying people. It's like telling somebody where the DUI checkpoint is, and so it kind of defeats the purpose of enforcement. If you warn people that they shouldn't speed, I get that, but to tell them where you're going to be setting up a speed trap doesn't make much sense, personally. With regard to first of all, everything Ken and Carmen had to say, I completely agree with. What we're witnessing on the boardwalk is mayhem. I believe that the city has not only the ability to, but the responsibility to ban e-bikes and electric, motorized, whatever you want to call it, on the boardwalk. If you want to use human-powered, and if it's accessibility issues for ADA, I totally agree with it, which is what San Clemente's doing, what San Diego's doing, and the other things that you mentioned in your presentation. However, there's just such a huge concentration of these people with walkers, and people with walkers, I mean, our elderly, people with strollers. It's really a recipe for disaster. We have had one fatality on an e-bike on the peninsula in front of the new fire station. I don't know if you are aware of that. That happened just before the new fire station opened. There's a lot of energy, and I appreciate the education for the kids, but and I agree, we need to get the residents educated as well, but there's really a tremendous number of these bikes on a very small path. And I don't know about sidewalks. I don't really have a feel. If I had a child, I wouldn't really allow a child to have an electric bike. I've been approached by at least 15 people, various residents, with regard to the ambassadors. They're all over the peninsula. You have two peninsula people who are on West Bay all the time, and they're just sitting at 10th Street Beach chit-chatting. You have others that spend a lot of time at Marina Park, just chit-chatting. The other ones, for a while, until I let Officer Carpinteria know it, all four to six of them would just hang out at 15th Street by the restrooms. With regard to the fact that they don't have notebooks, they are just ballparking every single day. There is no accurate measure. I've already written a letter to the city regarding a very close encounter by one of the junior guards who almost hit a friend of mine who was trying to cross the path, who had just passed the ambassadors, who told the guy to slow down, the kid, young man, probably 11, and he did nothing but accelerate and tell them to F off. So really, it's an enormous resource, financial resource, that I don't believe is having a profound effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Okay, seeing none, I might close public comments on this item. We're a little slow on time here. Any requests to speak from the dais on this item? Yes, Councilman Dixon.
Well, is it appropriate to outline where we want to go next?
You can state where you would like to.
With the staff's recommendations, just to restate, to update the website, great idea, and a highly visible, easy to understand, and maybe even have some graphic download brochures, or just as Maureen and Michelle had talked about, just some handouts. Another parent talked about handouts that can be downloaded from the website, make it easy. The education, obviously, we are a group of council members who like the education approach instead of over-regulating, but let's try it. We'll get to regulation in a moment. Let's do heavy-duty education, youth education, adult education. Everybody needs to be educated. The rules of the road, update on the ordinance. I'll put this in one all package, so we could all just vote or raise our hands on the ticket diversion program. I think it's an excellent idea. And maybe a resolution to advocate to the state to establish some minimum age requirements. In addition to what staff recommended, I would like to, I see the quarterly reports from the ambassadors. I did not know until just now that they don't have notebooks, so I don't know how they are auditing what they do in terms of reporting that data. I'd like to just understand their process and procedure. And Carmen, thank you about the boardwalk signage. Need just to follow up on that, to have some visual graphics. And I like the idea of flyers to all the vacation management companies, short-term rental, long-term rental companies, just so they are aware of the rules that we are looking for. Hopefully this massive education and working with the rental companies and the bike manufacturers, we can really educate people. We do not have, we call it a boardwalk. It is a promenade. It's the same width, what is it, Dave, 8 feet? That for 70 years. It's not a bike path. It's a promenade. And so until we can establish kind of a dual bike path, perhaps someday from 15th, 36th Street maybe, but in the meantime, we need to really heavily educate. And the ambassadors, I'm really focused on the ambassadors. I really need to understand how they're operating. And since that's just really important. So that's my package recommendations.
Great.
Thank you.
I think probably supported by the majority of us. I have to see what the language looks like for state submission. But yeah. Any other requests to speak? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, staff. Since we already took public comments on agenda and non-agenda items, we'll proceed to closed session. Mr. Harp, do you have a closed session announcement?
Yes, City Council will adjourn to closed session to meet with real property negotiators regarding the property at 1201 Dove Street. That's here in Newport Beach, California. And that's all set forth on the agenda under item number 4A. Thank you.
Thank you. We are recessed until 6 p.m. It's noticed as 5:30, but the regular meeting will be at 6 p.m. Kids ready? Call the meeting to order for the August 23rd, 2022 regular city council meeting. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that Councilmember O'Neill has an excused absence.
Thank you. Mr. Harper, is there a closed session report?
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. There's no closed session report this evening.
Thank you. Now it's time for invocation by Pastor John Hain, Redeemer Presbyterian Church from Newport Beach. Pastor? Yes.
Would you stand with me? We'll pray together. First, let me say, what a privilege to be with you all and to lead us in prayer. Let's pray. Our God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we give you thanks. You have been exceptionally generous to all of us who call Newport Beach our home. And in Holy Scripture, the author James writes that every good and perfect gift comes from you. We remember the beautiful coastal land with its oceans and waves, the varieties of vegetation, the breathtaking sunsets we enjoy. All of these are generous gifts from your good hand. We thank you also for the economic prosperity, for the material comforts that we enjoy that we regard as your blessing. We thank you for the physical peace from threat and danger. We thank you for our children, our school systems, and the numerous opportunities that our families enjoy. All of these are gifts from your generous hand. We thank you for these and many unmentioned blessings, and for all of them we give you our thanks. In addition to our thanksgiving, we humbly bring our petitions before you. We pray in particular for this council, for all who have a part in leading Newport Beach. We pray that you would grant wisdom. Give them wisdom that our leaders might make decisions that steward the gifts that you have entrusted to us, that these gifts would be used for more than our own pleasures. Give us prudence to appreciate how to serve our neighbors as ourselves, and in doing so to honor God. We pray not only for this council, but for all who are represented by the leaders here, for our neighbors in Newport Beach. In particular, we pray for those who are in need. Our needs in this place are less often physical privation and more often relational, emotional, and spiritual privation. And therefore, we pray that you would bring healing for those who suffer with addiction. Bring fellowship to those who are alone. Bring comfort to those who fill our hospitals with various afflictions. Bring hope where our neighbors are downcast. Our God, we know that there are many other needs which are unseen by us, but we pray that perhaps you would bring these needs to our attention, that we might have the opportunity to love and serve one another. We pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ, who is crucified and is now raised, the Lord of all, now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Josh. Okay, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, notice to the public.
The City Council of Newport Beach welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has a discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items.
Thank you. Now is the time for council announcements and oral reports from council members on committee activities, and time for council members to also place an A1 item on a future agenda. Councilman Duffield, do you have any announcements or reports? Councilwoman Dixon.
An announcement. It's been a long time since we've met, but I won't go through everything. But I just want to acknowledge on August 16th, Congresswoman Michelle Steele came to the Balboa Pier, and many of us, the mayor was there, and other coastal elected officials to celebrate the award of the funding through the Army Corps of Engineers of the sand replenishment program, which is an important addition to our eroding sand situation. And we won't see the sand replenishment hit Newport beaches probably for another 3 or 4 years. It will start, the replenishment being excavated out of the ocean will come into Seal Beach and work its way naturally, work its way down and further south of Newport Beach. So it took a lot of effort on the Congresswoman's part to stay with it and to get the funding through the Appropriations Committee in Congress and the support of the Army Corps of Engineers, for which we're very grateful for their support, endorsement of that appropriation action. So we all will appreciate more sand on the beach. Many of us on the Balboa Pier that day realized that the beach used to be wider, and it is not as wide as it used to be 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So the sand replenishment program is very, very important to the economic vitality of not just Newport Beach and the coastal cities, but all of Orange County, and our businesses and our hospitality businesses and our restaurants, and just the environmental preservation of our beaches. So it is really important to all of us, and I just want to acknowledge our appreciation to the Congresswoman for that. That was on August 16th. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Brenner.
Yes, I have a town hall meeting scheduled. It's going to be a Zoom meeting. We had almost 200 people on our last Zoom meeting, and so we decided to do another one Zoom because we do have a lot of in-person informational meetings in Corona Del Mar already. So that is going to be on September the 22nd from 5:30 to 7. We're specifically going to talk about coyotes again and burglaries because the coyotes are really causing problems for the neighbors. So we'll talk about that. Then I wanted to let you know about an introduction to gardening course that's going to be presented at Sherman Gardens. It's one of our recreation classes. So you register through the www.newportbeachca.gov/recreation. But it's on Thursdays from September 8th to September 29th, 10:30 a.m. to noon, and it's planting bulbs, indoor plants, easy vegetable gardening, and native plants, and it's $120. And Sherman Gardens should be the best possible education on that. And then just because so many of you are anxious for us to do another e-waste shredding event, we are having that planned for October the 22nd, at 8 a.m. to noon at Big Canyon Reservoir parking lot. That's the Pacific View on Pacific View Drive. And I know it's not until October 22nd, but you can start saving up your documents and everything soon. It's e-waste disposal and organics kitchen pail pickup. That's it.
Thank you. Councilman Avery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm in my 9th year meeting some really great young people through the Newport Harbor High School Mentor Program. And tonight, my mentee is here, and his name is Alex Pachon, and he's a junior at Newport Harbor High School, and he's interested in council business, civic affairs. So yesterday, we were unable to meet previous to tonight because the high school this is the first time I've experienced it, at least in the last 5 or 6 years. I had to go through a live scan fingerprinting, which goes to the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice took an unusually long time to review my fingerprints, I think. But regardless, I got the go-ahead this morning. And so Alex is here, and I'm glad to have him as a mentee and look forward to it. Combination of civic affairs. He's also trained up on what's going to happen here tonight, or at least none of us know what's going to happen, but he's got at least a script to guide him along as we go. So I'm really looking forward to reviewing the whole thing with him after the meeting. So welcome, Alex, and thank you for coming. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple slides to show. One is the press conference that Councilwoman Dixon referenced. Michelle Steele hosted a press conference with the city of Newport Beach on August 16th about sand replenishment. You can see my dad bod right there. We're joined by mayors from other from other coastal cities, including the mayor of Seal Beach and Huntington Beach. The speakers provided an update on the project, showing the design is 95% complete. Construction begins in 2024. Over the course of the next 4 to 5 years, the sand will replenish Newport Beach's ocean-facing beaches. Next slide, please. Okay, new ADU website. The city has launched a new website and accessory dwelling units for property owners interested in building ADUs. The website covers the city's incentives, the benefits of ADUs, helps streamline the development process, provides other resources. Staff will be expanding on the website with additional features in the coming months. And if your neighbors are against ADUs, tell them it's better than more high-density housing. So we encourage you to get your ADU set up. As part of the ADU initiative, the city is looking for owners and tenants of ADUs to tell their stories, which will be featured on the ADU website and guidebook, so a little behind the scenes. Neighbors who have had positive experiences with ADUs will help inspire others to make a difference in our community. You can participate at newportbeachca.gov/ADU survey. Next, we have a homeless issue speaker series this fall. For a series is free. It's 1-hour public forums featuring agencies that help the city provide services to those experiencing homelessness. The first will be September 12th at 6 p.m. at the Civic Center Community Room, featuring CityNet, our nonprofit partner. Other forums will be held in October and November in the community room. And the last is Meals on Wheels, volunteers needed. The Newport Beach Meals on Wheels program needs substitute volunteer meal delivery drivers. Substitute drivers are the invaluable group of volunteers who fill in when regular scheduled drivers become unavailable due to illness or vacation. Drivers bring meals to homebound seniors, we have many of which here in Newport Beach. Within the city of Newport Beach, provide a friendly face to residents who often can't leave their homes and have no visitors. This is a great opportunity to make an immediate and personal difference on someone's life. Please call 949-718-1820 for more information or to apply. That's all I got. Madam Clerk, please read. Oh, and you have my A1 item from prior study session, correct? Do I need to repeat that, or do you have enough information for it?
No, I think we're good. It's with the working with Pedigo on their education program, partnering together with the schools and looking particularly at school sites, at the community center, and Oasis.
Great.
Right.
Thank you. Perfect. Madam Clerk, please read the notice regarding public comments on the consent calendar.
This is the time in which council members may pull items from the consent calendar for discussion. Those are items 1 through 17. Public comments are also invited on consent calendar items. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. If any item is removed from the consent calendar by a council member, members of the public are invited to speak on each item for up to 3 minutes per item. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the City Council votes on the motion unless members of the City Council request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent calendar for separate action.
Okay, great. Before we move on to that, I think Councilwoman Brenner wanted to do her own A1.
I did. We wanted to do an A1 discussion about passing a resolution from our city council to the state asking them to enforce all of their regulations on group homes.
Thank you. Okay, bringing it back to the consent calendar. Councilman Duffield, do you have any items to pull from the consent calendar or conflicts to announce related to items 1 through 17? Great. Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, Mayor. I would like to pause number 17, mainly because I would like to give our fire chief an opportunity to explain this item for community benefit. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councilman Brenner.
None.
Councilman Avery.
I have none. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have none.
Okay, I've got a couple. Sorry.
Oh, perfect.
So quickly, could you provide some background on item number 3, Grace?
Oh.
Yeah, I'll just do it right now and I'll incorporate it in,
Oh, sure.
rather than having to pull the item.
Yeah, okay. Yes, and item 3 is side letters with all of our bargaining groups, I should say 9 out of 10 of our bargaining groups, to adjust the COLA adjustment to the existing contracts there. So for the public and a little background is we have our bargaining groups, most of them were all open. We had to initiate contract negotiations with them in 2021. We had very good, productive discussions with almost all of them. The last one is actually on the agenda, our lifeguards. But for the rest of them, we went into 4-year contracts with COLA adjustments that were a very good, reasonable rate anywhere between 1% to 2% over a 4-year period each year. So those was what was agreed to at that time. But as we all know, in 2022, this year, inflation, as it was starting to increase even last year, really started to spike this year, and in fact hit a high of, I want to say 9.1% in June. It's come down a little bit to 8.5 in July, but clearly very significant, something we hadn't seen before, something we weren't anticipating was happening. So as inflation was climbing, our bargaining groups, particularly starting with our public safety groups, had come in the spring and approached the city about the impacts that this was having on their members. So we worked with we have a labor ad hoc group taking a look at that, and with our full council as well, looking at if there's a bit of mitigation to do for that. So what was agreed upon through the labor ad hoc and the full council was to bring back for open session is to adjust the COLA adjustment to 3% for the remaining 3 years of the 4-year contracts for all the labor groups. So that's still very modest. If you think about the inflation factor being close to 9%, that 3% a year kind of adds up to that 9 to kind of keep even, and that doesn't account for where inflation will go, in the next few years. So it's for a set period of time. Some will be starting in this current 22 year, some will start in 2023. It won't go longer than the 4-year contract term, which is about 2025. And at that point, of course, we will go into open negotiations again with the bargaining groups and council and determine adjustments at that period of time.
So we certainly pray inflation we say uncle, and inflation ceases or levels out. But just so there's full transparency, this was recommended by the Labor Subcommittee, correct?
That's correct.
And that's made up of Councilman O'Neill, Mayor Pro Tem Blum, and Councilwoman Dixon?
Yes.
And then after supported by them, we supported the entire council in closed session, correct? So all 7 of us. And here we are today. I'm doing this to show the full transparency. This is our response to national inflation numbers and concerns about employee retention. We're having employee retention problems, as many communities are. We want to keep our great staff. And a lot of Americans, quite frankly, are really hurting. If you read the reports on people skipping meals or struggling with necessities like gas, it's pretty heartbreaking. And we've been blessed in this city that we can continue to offer the good services due to increased property tax revenue and a strong budget, but not everyone is as fortunate. And my reason for asking you is just full transparency of the process, how seriously we took it, and that it is our hope, obviously, that inflation ceases, but I don't see any sign of it happening this year. And this is a 3-year step up, if you will. It's not an immediate response to address the full 9% currently, but we hope that we will be hedging those inflation numbers over the course of the contracts.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Brenner, do you want to add a comment?
I wanted to ask a question. I had my interview with the police and fire union today, or the, I don't know if it's called a union, their league. And they were mentioning how many people are being skimmed from our department, and whether, whether other departments are paying more or have other benefits that we don't have. And I believe they said we were like 14 officers down in people that have left and gone to other police departments. So I'm wondering how that plays in. We've already been talking about wanting to increase the number of officers that we have on duty at any one particular time. So how does this fit into that dynamic as far as what could happen in the future? If that continues, then I'm wondering how we would be able to increase the presence of officers that we have on the street at any time.
Well, as the mayor spoke about too, the retention issue, I think we face, as do other agencies, across our county and the state, and I think probably nationally as well. So I think this goes to help with this adjustment that we're making, and certainly it means a lot to all the associations that the council has taken that into consideration, even though we had agreed upon contracts. So that's good. And we'll have to continue to evaluate as we continue to move forward. Retention's very much highly on our mind. I talk regularly with our HR director. I get regular updates of what our vacancy factors look like right now, and where there's areas that if I feel that we need to bring something back because we have issues, then I will certainly do that.
So you could do that at any time that you needed to if it really was causing an issue for us.
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And bringing it back to two more items, I'm having lodge a no vote on item 11 and 13. So Mayor Pro Tem, do you have a motion?
I do. I'd like to move the balance of the consent calendar with the amended minutes, an amended contract for item number 12, item 17 pulled by Councilmember Dixon, and lodging a no vote for the mayor on item 11 and 13.
Thank you, and I'll second. Public comments on the consent calendar, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. As you may recall, transparency is an issue for me, so I was pleased to hear how transparent item number 3 on the consent calendar, the increase of the salaries, has been handled. But I have to say, when the city manager mentioned your ad hoc labor committee or group or whatever it is that seems well known to the staff and well known to you, I have to say that's the first time I ever heard of it. I don't know how it was created. I don't know when it met. I don't know what it did. If such a ad hoc committee exists, perhaps you should let the city clerk know, because the city clerk maintains, in the interest of transparency, a web page on which she lists all of our boards, commissions, and committees. I see on that list currently an ad hoc committee on short-term lodging. I see an ad hoc council committee on the general plan update, which I think may be a sunset. I see one on residential care facilities. I see one on homeless. I don't see any labor negotiating committee on that list. So I would question whether the city has really been transparent about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon and honorable council members. My name is Wade Womack. I am a longtime resident of Newport Beach. I stand before you today in strong support of the wage adjustment for the city lifeguards, as stated on consent item number 15. Our lifeguards perform rescues in some of the most dangerous conditions, whether it be in the giant waves of the wedge, or bouncing through the pilings of our piers, or upon the bone-crushing rocks of our many jetties. The Newport lifeguards deserve to be paid well, and they are the best trained and most qualified aquatic rescuers in California, if not the nation. The Newport lifeguards are the water rescue authority of our area. For example, when a man recently went missing in the city waters of Newport Harbor on August 7th, the Orange County Sheriff's Harbor Patrol was unable to rescue the victim. The Sheriff's Harbor Patrol eventually called our lifeguards, who ultimately recovered the victim. Unfortunately, because our lifeguards are not integrated into the harbor safety services, this was a delayed recovery situation rather than an immediate rescue. This is a tragic situation. In terms of compensation for our lifeguards, the city should consider a shift differential pay for those seasonal lifeguards that will be integrated into the harbor safety services. Both the City of Long Beach and City of San Diego have improved safety in their respective harbors by integrating their respective lifeguards into the harbor safety services. By adding a shift differential for our seasonal lifeguards, the city will be in a position to improve public safety and integrate our lifeguards into the harbor patrol services in the city waters of Newport Harbor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Womack. Any other speakers? Yes, and if you plan to speak, now is the time to come forward as well. Hi.
Sorry, Carmen Rawson, regarding the losing employees for the police department and other departments, I would like to understand the reason they are leaving. Is it because we have officers retiring? Is it, for example, a new police officer here in the Newport Beach department who decided to move to Arizona because he had achieved the maximum pension benefits that he could achieve and moving to a different state, a different area, then who could accumulate years to qualify for a different pension. So was the reason for the police officer to leave was independent of the wages and benefits that could be offered in the city. So I would like to see more transparency of the reasons why we are losing police officers or any other type of employee. Thank you.
Yes, next speaker.
Yes, could I get these passed out? Thank you. I'm Ida Margaret Wolf, and what?
This is on the consent calendar?
Yes.
On consent.
And I'm all for the lifeguards because I was saved by one, and they didn't build a business for the lifeguard that saved me, but they are excellent swimmers. On Sunday, I got signatures to get the spikes off of Ben Carlson's head and on his shoulders because we're losing our seagulls. If you ever saw a seagull come down on those spikes, and they're as long as my finger, and it goes right through their feet, and then they have to push to get off. They come in like a plane, and then they got to push to get off. And then they go to the ATM machine on top, and they fall on their stomachs. And then they go out to the ocean and die. You'll never see a dead bird on the sand. And when I was getting signatures, you don't have a gray area. People are either for it or against it. And the ones that were against it told me that I had to have an alternative, that I could not do that. And so I said, there is an alternative. They should put him in a graveyard where all the other heroes are, because I go see heroes all the time. And I've been to Arlington, I know heroes. And, but at any rate, those spikes have to come off of that. And I don't think the city approved the spikes. And that's why I'm here tonight. I want permission to remove the spikes because they've been on there way too long. And I'd like permission tonight.
So there's an opportunity for you to make comments on the consent calendar items. The council can't take any type of action, so you would not have permission to do anything with the Ben Carlson statue. But thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
But may I ask one more question on this? Did the city give permission to put the spikes on?
What we'll do is we'll have somebody reach out to you. There's people here from the fire department. They can talk to you about the statue.
Because if you would see the torture that they go through, and I say, would you rather go see Elvis in Tennessee that was tortured to death with the doctors, or would you rather come and see Ben Carlson that's torturing the seagulls?
So none of these items are really on the consent calendar, but thank you for your comments.
So they will get a hold of me, you say?
Someone will just reach out to you, right? If you just go to the back of the room, someone will touch base with you.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought you were going to say Flock of Seagulls is a good band to compare, not Elvis. Next speaker, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back. We have a vote in a second. Sorry, we have a motion in a second.
You have a second?
Yeah, yes, I seconded. We do. Let's vote.
The motion carries 6-0.
Okay, we had item 17 pulled by Councilwoman Dixon. Diane, sorry, Councilwoman Dixon, would you like a staff report?
Actually, I'd like what I wanted to do is give Chief Boyles a chance to explain this. The reason I pulled it is that the Orange County Grand Jury made a report, and that's what's addressed in the staff report, which was fine. But I just think people should understand, and many of us have received questions over the years, why does a paramedic, ambulance, plus an fire engine truck accompany one another on their rescue mission to the place of where the rescue is needed, and then ultimately up to the hospital? I think perhaps there may be some misinformation that our residents may not be aware of, and I'd like the chief to clarify what exactly we do in those type of situations. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jeff Boyles, your fire chief. So just so that I understand, because there's several findings in here, you want me to talk about the fire engine going to medical calls, correct? Okay, Ms. Dixon, I appreciate your question, because believe it or not, that's the one I am asked most often. And I understand the optics of it, so I'll unwind the clock just a little bit, and I'll go quick, but I think it will make sense when I'm done. Back in 1970, following a series of legislative acts by Congress at the federal level, then California Governor Ronald Reagan signed the Wedgwood-Townsend Paramedic Act. And what that did was it encouraged local municipalities to train paramedics with their public safety personnel. So when the local municipalities looked around the landscape, the fire service already had the infrastructure in place with their fire engines and personnel because they're strategically located throughout their communities. So fast forward in today's world, we've refined it, we've tweaked it, we've adjusted quite a bit, obviously over the last 50 years, and now we have a paramedic on every one of our 8 fire engines. We have 8 fire stations here in Newport Beach, on the peninsula, Balboa Island, Fashion Island, Newport Coast, up near the airport, Corona Del Mar. You know where all of our fire stations are. So let me give you an example of the peninsula down by the library. That area is difficult geographically to reach if you're going to go down to Peninsula Park or down by the Wedge area, or Corona Del Mar with their tight streets, or Balboa Island with their intricacies of the bridge to access it or the tight streets to get around. So what we have in place already, the infrastructure of a fire engine that has hose and water equipped to fight a fire or deal with a traffic accident or some type of rescue in that particular pocket of the community, it naturally makes sense to train one of those fire personnel in paramedicine. So we also put the cardiac monitors on there, all the cardiotonic drugs, respiratory drugs. So if it's a medical call or if it's a fire call, that fire engine is closely located and gets to a home within 3 or 4 minutes in our town. Our ambulances then show up 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes later at times because they're spread thinner. But when they get there, there's already a paramedic on scene initiating some medical care. So anything from a broken ankle to a heart attack, those 3 fire personnel with a paramedic can start initiating the care that's needed. And then the paramedics on the ambulance will show up as well, which are also full-time firefighter paramedics here at Newport Beach. And then the ambulance will then take the patient to the hospital, which 9 times out of 10 in our community, that's Hoag. So with that said, I know you've heard me say this, but it bears saying again because I get really passionate about this subject. Continuously, year after year here in Newport Beach, we exceed state and national averages of cardiac save rates. So I attribute that to a very engaged and educated community that initiates bystander CPR, our location of our fire stations and the rapid response, the skilled and the training that our paramedics have. And then we're fortunate that we have a world-class hospital right here in town that we can initiate quick, rapid, quality treatment and then deliver a patient to Hoag Hospital where they see the person through. So we have incredible save rates. The system that we have in place, I know the optics of why does a fire engine show up because I just called for paramedics or I just called for an ambulance, but what you're getting is a quicker response that way, and you're getting the ideal amount of personnel if you need to come downstairs or if you need to get out of a situation where 2 people just quite frankly isn't enough. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And actually, this was information that I appreciate learning again. I don't know if all residents realize that the fire truck generally arrives first before the ambulance.
Correct.
When you mentioned that I thought we had an ambulance at all 8 fire stations. We do not?
We have an ambulance at our new Station 2 on the peninsula, one in Fashion Island and one in Corona Del Mar. So we only have 3 ambulances that are taking folks to the hospital.
So that's a key point you just made. So it's the fire trucks that respond first, typically in a rescue situation.
Correct.
And then they perform the rescue. The paramedics follow. Now, the final leg or the next step is taking the patient to the hospital. Do both the ambulance and the fire truck go to the hospital?
Another good question. So in our system, about 2/3 of the time, it's what we call an ALS, Advanced Life Support, where it requires a paramedic escort. However, the paramedics on our ambulances, there are 2 of them, are generally equipped the majority of the time to take the patient to the hospital, just the 2 of them. One drives, one sits in the back as a paramedic ambulance attendant, we would call them. So that fire engine, let's go back to the scenario of all the way down in, let's say, Corona Del Mar, Flower Street in Corona Del Mar. That fire engine can get there rapidly and deploy a paramedic into the house, and then an ambulance will show up later. And those 2 firefighter paramedics on the ambulance will then, 9 times out of 10, take the patient over to Hoag Hospital themselves, and that fire engine remains available in Corona Del Mar for the next rescue.
I applaud the system, and I think the grand jury report was more to the OCFA system and not necessarily applicable to our particular process and procedures. And one other point I'd like to just call out is and I didn't ask you this before when we spoke today, so that I hope you have the data. What % of our total firefighter population is also trained in paramedics?
We have 42 licensed paramedics that are functioning in that capacity right now. We actually have more than that are credentialed.
There's a cross-training,
yes.
And we've been doing this for many years.
We've been doing it for so many years.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but the
Right.
point is we cross-train firefighting and emergency response or paramedic.
Yes. And you know, at the end of the day, we provide a fire engine and fire protection with personnel to do so. So it just makes sense to cross-train them, and they can also serve as a paramedic.
Okay, one other commercial is the City of Newport Beach, maybe you could explain this so everybody is aware. We have a unique insurance plan for any resident who needs an ambulance. Could you talk about that for a moment?
That's our fire medic program, and it is currently, I believe, $65. If anybody knows that to be different, shake your head, but I believe it's $60 to $65 a year, and it's an annual subscription that will come in your water bill. And essentially what it does is it protects you and your family and anyone in your house. Should you call for paramedics and get transported to a hospital, you will not be billed.
Very good. Well, thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor. Very good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Avery.
Yeah, I've always been I think all of us are, that the chief leads his department and his or her department and makes these decisions. And, for me, I back that up. And we have a great fire department. And with just my own personal story, my father 20 years ago suffered a ruptured aorta on the Balboa Peninsula Point at his home. And that the station from the Frybury there got there in about 4 minutes. They pulled him out of his home, and they diagnosed him basically with blood pressure falling in code gray up to Hoag. And he was in the emergency room for about a minute and a half, and then a surgeon was just coming off a surgery, and he went right into surgery. And he made a full recovery, and it was extraordinary. And it's one of the things that makes this town so appealing, is especially for folks as you get older, to know that that kind of thing can happen. The chances of his survival were very, very remote. It would be almost anywhere else, I believe. So it was just so impressive to me the way it happened. And I'm really grateful to our fire department and to Hoag Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Duffield.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Chief Wells, if in the perfect world, assuming in the pretend world, if you could have any vehicle that you wanted, would you have a fire truck like it is now, or could you get yourself a smaller, more compact vehicle that would perform the same function? And just wondering, versus, because our streets are so small and all of that, would you prefer to have a vehicle someday? Because we do have a surplus every year. It seems like it would behoove us to maybe consider a smaller vehicle to get around those places that you described, or are you happy with the way it is now? Pretend world.
In a pretend world, we had a smaller fire engine about 20, 25 years ago. You may remember the little tiny opening that we had on the Balboa Island station. So we designed a smaller fire engine to fit in there and to maneuver around the streets a little bit. And what we found was just the amount of equipment that we're trying to carry everywhere these days. It's really a rolling toolbox. We've designed some fire engines that were a little too big, probably. We've scaled them back. They've grown again and they scale back. So it seems like every time we go to buy a new one, they're not off the shelf. We design them, and a lot of times in this city, we'll design them with shorter wheelbases. If you look really closely at a neighboring city, like in Costa Mesa or Huntington, they are a little bit longer. We design ours shorter because of Corona Del Mar and Balboa Island and those places. So they are a little bit smaller, not a lot, but they are.
Good answer. Councilman Dixon.
One final question. You mentioned, and this was news to me, that we do not have, I didn't think about it before, that we don't have an ambulance at all 8. So we have how many ambulances?
3. Currently 3.
Do we need more?
I believe so, yes.
Do we need 8, or do we need a total of 8, or what's the ideal?
Well, that's probably a larger discussion that I'll run by Ms. DeYoung.
I understand.
But it involves adding personnel, and I do believe we're at that breakover point where we're in largely an ambulance transport business now and a medical response with a lot of what we do. It's not to say we need to do away with our fire engines, because there's still a need for that. And that impacts people's insurance rates. So you need the fire engines on the road, but we also need ambulances. So we do need more than the current 3 that we have right now. Absolutely.
All right. So I may not be here for the next budget season, but let's remember that, those who survive here.
Handle that diplomatically, because I do think we
That's all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, see no other requests to speak from the dais. Go to the public on this item. Public comments, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon and council members, I apologize, I'm going to try to ad-lib this one. I think it makes sense to have our giant Swiss Army knives first on scene. Highly supportive of the fire department and their excellent work. I think perhaps one point is the current response allows for kind of a unified chain of command. So it's all under one agency. I think in the past there were third parties such as SEALs Ambulance and all that kind of stuff, which created chaotic responses and uncoordinated responses. And, as an example of uncoordinated responses, there was a big fire at the Balboa Bay Club a few years ago, and our firefighters were storming up to the 3rd floor to put out the fire. And unbeknownst to them, an outside agency, the Sheriff's Harbor Patrol, showed up and sprayed water all over the place. They almost killed our firefighters with a steam event. Thousands of pounds of water. So I really like the way our fire department's set up, and I think we could do more coordinated and organized unified command. And I think our city can take care of that in our harbor patrol by running a city harbor patrol. And back to your retention thing, what a cool thing to retain officers, get the firefighters, police, lifeguards integrated. throw that on the brochure, and let's hire some safety folks and make our city better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Motion, Councilman Dixon?
Yes, thank you. Let me turn to number 17 here. Just want to accept the where's the fire, stop sending fire trucks to medical calls, authorize the mayor to sign the cover letter and remit the responses of the city of Newport Beach and the fire chief to the presiding judge of Orange County Superior Court.
Great, I'll second. Let's vote.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Public comments on non-agenda items, please come forward.
And just a reminder for the public, agenda item number 18 has been removed from the agenda. So if you want to speak to agenda item number 18, now would be the time.
Perfect segue. I came to speak on agenda item 18. It's off the agenda, so I'm speaking on non-agenda items instead. And there's a bit of extemporaneous comment here. I apologize. My name is William Croner. I'm a resident of Newport Beach, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of Preserve Orange County, which is a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the built environment in Orange County. We did file a letter, and one of our members filed a letter on what used to be agenda item 18, which was an appeal regarding a residential structure on Bay Island. What those comments say is that this structure is an important historic structure, both for California law purposes and for purposes of the regulations of the Coastal Commission. The city staff report, which you saw, says that it is not identified as a historic resource. That is true. That is a 1992 survey that is 30 years old and a fairly limited scope. So let me talk about the property because the city staff didn't identify it. The property is a home that was designed by Gilbert Stanley Underwood. He is the architect of the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite. For those that know that, it's the gem of our national park system, in my view, and the view of many others. He's the designer of the U.S. Courthouse in Los Angeles, of Terminal Annex, which was the Central Post Office. It's a Mission Revival Central Post Office of Los Angeles, or was for 50 years. And so he's quite a well-known architect. 20 of his buildings are listed on the National Register. We believe that this home is eligible to be on the National Register, which is the criteria for it being a historic resource, not whether it was identified as such in a 1992 survey. It was built in 1930. It's a vernacular Cape Cod of the sort of beach homes that were constructed on the East Coast and on the West Coast in the 20s and 30s. It hasn't been substantially modified since it was designed. It's been, looking at the permits, things have been done, but it's basically the original exterior structure. So it's an important historic property that the city is now going to lose. Bay Island itself, of course, is identified as a local important resource. I happened to spend a week there in the summer one summer in the mid to late 50s. I remember Roy Rogers running his racing engines his staff running the racing engines on the beach, and you could walk down and see them in the barrels. It was wonderful. I don't know whether he and Dale owned the house or rented it or Republic Pictures owned it, but Bay Island's an important thing. We're now going to lose a structure on Bay Island. So I would suggest a new historic survey is in order by the city instead of a 30 years old one where we're going to continue to lose important historic resources. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, as you well know, my name is Jim Mosier. I too wanted to speak about what was going to be item 18, which, as Mr. Croner said, it was to be an appeal to be heard by you of a request to demolish a 2-year-old home on Bay Island. The issue of the appeal, as I understood it, was whether the city had properly conducted the California Environmental Quality Act review required, called CEQA. I think it's important to understand CEQA would not prevent you from allowing or approving the demolition of the building. CEQA is primarily a disclosure requirement on the part of the state that if you approve something that is going to be or have a detrimental effect of any kind, that the public is informed, and you, of the detrimental effects that your decision will have. I see in the lobby that if this had gone forward, the city has added a little paragraph at the end of the resolution denying that there was any historical significance to this particular home. And I have to admit that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. When this was before the Planning Commission, it didn't seem particularly an exceptional building to me. But as Mr. Kroner and the others have put forward in the letters they have sent to you, I think they have made a compelling argument that it could be. And my reading of CEQA is if there is an argument that it could be, it presumptively is historic, and you need to perform that historic analysis to let us, the public, and yourselves know if it truly is a historic building that is worthy of preservation and it is detrimental to the public to demolish it. So I do not know why the appeal was withdrawn, but I do not agree with the city's just summary dismissal of the idea that it could be a historic resource at all. I think you actually are compelled to do that analysis and decide whether it is or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward.
This is public comment?
Yes, it is.
You said? Okay. Good evening, Newport Council. My name is Dr. Truth Bay. I'm actually a Los Angeles policy analyst, homeless COC, and I got a couple of reports that I brought here today. So I'm brought here today because there are certain people that are born African descent that have been suffering some discrimination. When Newport Beach, the county, started in 1906, the history of the indigenous people here, the Tongva and the Chumash, which many of them integrated into all colors, were the original people here. Now, as this is primarily European-based, I noticed that even the looks, observation, it's like you don't belong here. And that was said not only on one or two occasions, but it's apparent. My purpose is to house the homeless. I don't care what color you are. Natalie Bassimian is a person I like to work with to find out why the homeless count is 48, when I, in the last 7 days, count 107, from Avocado to Irvine, just to name a few. We have to get the data correct in order for the federal dollars to come through. What I did like is a prayer, powerful prayer, at a city council meeting. We don't do that at LA City. They need to do it. They need some God in their life. I want people to remind that the God that we're praying to was homeless. Jesus was a homeless carpenter. So while we praise him on Sunday and treat others that may not look like you a different way, is contradictory than loving your brother, loving thy neighbor. So I would like to see some improvements. This is a beautiful city. But it has to be diverse. It has to represent all people. We really do need to have a forum. You need to hear the testimonies of people who are from here that are overlooked over and over again. That's why I'm here, to remind you that we are all equal. We're all human. But the way the federal dollars are going, redlining, there are certain neighborhoods that didn't have people like my family were able to move into freely. It's something that a lot of people don't want to hear about, but it is American reality. And unless you're a person of African descent, it is unfair to say that was over a long time ago. No, it's still happening today, called equity. A lot of nonprofits ran by minority women are not given the same funding, and this is a reality that we're speaking on right now. We have the blueprint to solve homelessness in LA County. We're going to be replacing LAHSA. So if you're not familiar with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, they are running at its last end. So I want to know what COC organization works here with Newport Beach to have the correct data, because it's definitely not 48. Certainly not 48 that you counted, and how we can actually build permanent housing. I do have one more thing. There is a organization called Our Lady Queen of Angels. Our Lady Queen of Angels Catholic Church is actually charging homeless people $1,000 to $2,500 to rent a home, which is absurd. You don't have any type of homeless services, low income housing. We have to have that type of housing for all people to enjoy. And so that's what I want to work with you on. And I see the homeless events that you have coming up. I'd like to be a part of that. I gave you my information, and I gave you a copy of just one page of the homeless strategy for LA County and LA City. In it is a chart that I would like to see, the Newport Beach City chart for homelessness, if you have one, that we can share and see how we can actually help outreach and engagement the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have low-income housing supportive services at the county and at the city. We're happy to educate you on that with the help of, is our liaison here?
Homeless coordinator Natalie Besmashrian is not here, but we can certainly have her reach out and connect with you. So we'll do that.
You can teach her your thoughts. She'll share with you what she has and maybe work together.
That'd be awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Angelica Harris Copeland. I am from Newport Beach, born and raised. I am addressing District 6 Joy Brenner. I work at Starbucks in Fashion Island, and my mother has been banned from Fashion Island because of a couple of security guards have said that she doesn't look like she belongs in Newport Beach. And he makes sure that she will be gone from the center. They have targeted my mom and targeted me in various hostile ways. I want to point out that there is an Asian homeless woman who comes into my Starbucks where I work at. She is disturbing the peace, such as throwing tables and panhandling for money constantly. They welcome her and did not ban her from the mall when my manager has called security on her multiple times. On the other hand, for my mom, security and Irvine Company have unfairly banned her by refusing to hear our difficult experience. I've been feeling tense and uneasy going into work in such a hostile environment. I just look to feel welcomed in a place where I live and have grown up in. I would just wonder why a woman who is not obeying their code of conduct a couple of times is completely welcomed at Fashion Island, but my mom, who just drops me off to work, is not welcomed. I want to work in an environment that is just non-discriminatory, and I would like to request an apology letter and a cultural training for the staff at the shopping centers in the Newport Beach community, and possibly some other homeless services to help those who are panhandling for money that I've seen on the corner of the road when I'm coming from work. They're just like a guy, he wears this like long hair and he just like stands there and asks for money constantly on the center, when technically in their code of conduct you're not supposed to be doing that, but they don't say anything. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Sure. Councilwoman Brenner would like to speak to the young lady who just spoke before you leave. So, because she represents the district you referenced, I believe. She'll come. So this meeting will be done shortly. She'll talk to you after. Thank you. Okay, so moving on now to, since item 18 was withdrawn by the appellant, we have item number 19. Staff?
Mayor Muldoon and members of the City Council, this is an amendment to our zoning code and our LCP to update our density bonus ordinance. We have Principal Planner Jaime Murillo here who can give you a detailed report, a brief one.
Short and sweet, yep.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Muldoon, members of the council. As Jim mentioned, this is an amendment to both our zoning code and our local coastal program implementation plan. Our current density bonus regulations are contained within our zoning code, and they were last updated in 2010. Since then, there's been over 18 changes in state law related to density bonus. And so the purpose of this is to simply update our code to be fully consistent with state law. And also establish a process for the review and approval of density bonus regulations. With regard to the local coastal program amendment, there's currently no density bonus regulations within our Title 21 ordinance or municipal code title. And so we would be adding very similar regulations to match the zoning code regulations. And the only difference would be to clarify that any density bonus project, any incentives that are granted cannot result in any deviations to coastal resource protection standards, such as public access, views, bluff protection, or canyons and habitat. Real quick, just background on density bonus. It's essentially an incentive tool that allows developers to benefit from increased density or additional units if they incorporate a minimum percentage of affordable units within their project. And so the little exhibit on the right-hand side just shows on a site that may allow for a maximum development limit of 100 units. If the developer incorporated 10 low-income units, that would be a 10% low-income project. They would be entitled to 20 additional bonus units, which can be rented or sold at market rate. And those are represented in that additional block in orange on the top of that exhibit. In addition to the additional units, density bonus law provides other incentives to help ensure that the project is economically and physically suitable or can be accommodated. So it includes reduced parking ratios, development incentives to reduce development costs, and then development standard waivers to help physically accommodate the density bonus project. The number of eligible project types has expanded over the years, and so that's one of the main components of the amendment is to expand the types of projects that are eligible. So in addition to your traditional affordable housing projects, which are shaded in green, which is your typical very low and moderate income housing projects, the law has been expanded to include special needs housing, which includes transitional foster youth, disabled veterans, or homeless persons, also college student housing and senior citizen housing. The law also includes alternative options that allow for the conversion of apartments to condominiums and the donation of land. Oh, yeah, sorry. Just closer. The other change in density bonus laws that needs to be updated in our ordinance is the amount of bonus. In our current code, the bonus is limited 35%, but over the years, the bonus has expanded. And so depending on the level of affordability that's provided, the deeper level of affordability, the greater the bonus is provided. So for example, a very low income project, which provides 15% low-income units, they would be entitled to a 50% bonus. But on the higher end, for example, a moderate income project, in order to receive a 50% bonus, they would have to provide 44% of their units as affordable. And then for a 100% affordable housing project, regardless of the affordability level, they'd be entitled to an 80% bonus. And in some cases, there is a no density limit. If a project is 100% affordable within half a mile of a major transit stop. We currently don't have a qualifying major transit stop in the city, but we are monitoring this. There will be changes, in the future related to ridership, so this is a possibility. The bonus varies for special needs housing or the alternative bonuses. They range from 15 to 35%. One thing just to point out is there's no stacking of bonuses. So if a project qualifies for multiple types of bonuses, the applicant would have to pick one type of bonus to receive. The only exception is when they incorporate childcare. With an eligible project type, there's an additional incentive that can be granted. As mentioned, there's automatic parking reduction. So our normal parking rate is 2.5 spaces per unit. With a density bonus project, that is reduced to 1.5 to 1 spaces, depending on the number of bedrooms provided within the project. The number of incentives that a developer would be eligible for has increased in state law as well. So this would be updated within our ordinance. And these are really intended to be regulatory relief that results in identifiable and actual cost reduction. So these are intended to make the project more economically feasible. So a developer could incorporate like a commercial component to allow mixed-use zoning that might make the project more feasible. They can deviate from development costs that reduce development standards that reduce costs, such as if we had a standard for a high-quality material and it was really expensive, they can request for relief from that. They can also request relief from development impact fees or dedications. This is the one reduction that would require city council approval. It would be at the discretion of the council to grant any relief from fees or dedications. And lastly, our ordinance doesn't include a requirement for development standard waivers, and so the amendment would include, consistent with state law, the provision that a density bonus project is entitled to unlimited number of waivers or reductions of development standards that would physically prevent the project from being constructed. So that could be development standards such as setbacks, open space, or heights. And so in this example, you can see with the density bonus, the project may require additional height allowance in order to fit the project. And so that's an example. Lastly, our ordinance would include a clear approval process. That would be through an affordable housing implementation plan that sets forth the requirement that a developer would need to include as part of their application and clarifies the review authority. So the review authority would be the same as the base review authority for any underlying development application. But any development that includes a request for a waiver or reduction of development standards, that would automatically get pushed up to the Planning Commission. And any request that includes a financial incentive or waiver of fees, the project would then get bumped up to the City Council for review. And that concludes my presentation and available for any questions.
Thank you. Any requests? Councilwoman Dixon.
I do. Jaime, thank you. Just some clarifying questions. Is this mandatory? No developer, I mean, is a developer required to seek a density bonus series of waivers?
No, it's mandatory for the city to adopt an ordinance, but it's essentially a tool or incentive tool for developers, so it's voluntary if they'd like to utilize the tool.
All right, and Simone's not here tonight, is he?
No.
All right, as we go forward with our general plan update process, will we be considering, if we adopt this density bonus measure tonight, or ultimately we do we consider the impact on the city on the reduction of the setbacks, reduced parking requirements, and how do we plan for the city as we do our updated general planning process to allow for the possible eventuality that setbacks are going to be narrower, smaller, fewer parking space requirements, and the impacts of the city as we know it today? How do we deal with that?
I'll tackle that one. As we go forward with implementing our general plan and our housing element, we're going to be coming up with overlay districts and development standards for the variety of different housing types that we anticipate. With the density bonus provisions, it's something that a developer can take advantage of, and these development standard waivers are mandatory. So it's not to say that the development standards that we might put into our codes are completely irrelevant. They definitely set a stage for what the community would like to see, the building heights, the setbacks. Those are important to us. And then it'll be the developer has to basically come forward and say, hey, I can't physically fit my project in that envelope that you've created for me, and here's why. And it has to do with the added bonus units that would be otherwise allowed. It's not they don't have to do this process, but it's mandatory for us to review and approve those if they can demonstrate the project can't be fit. And so, as we go forward, we're going to be evaluating and setting the development standards the community feels is appropriate for the densities that we anticipate. We have to understand that those development standards, some of them will be waived. We've done density bonus projects where we have reduced setbacks and increased building heights already. So it goes through a review process with discussion with the community, and then went to the Planning Commission, and another application came forward to the City Council. We'd have to examine our general plan and our utilities to make sure it all fits. But at the end of the day, this is a mandatory process. Density bonus is with us. This is where the state has provided these tools for the development community in order to facilitate housing production, but also to facilitate affordable housing production. And, the primary focus of this amendment is to make sure our ordinance is consistent with state law. And we're not going beyond that to provide any additional.
Right, I see that. I don't recall seeing anything about green space or parks. Does the density bonus law allow a developer to reduce the amount of green space that we, as a city, would normally require, or that we typically have required?
They could, in two respects, where we have an objective development standard that says, you have to provide 8% of your project site for park space. They could come in and say, that just won't fit. I can't fit my project on here with this density bonus. They can also ask for it in terms of a concession, which means, if I'm going to donate that land, I paid, $3 million an acre for that, and, now you want me to give it to you for free, and that makes their project financially not viable. And they could come in and demonstrate that from a financial standpoint, it would preclude the construction of affordable units. And so in those two respects, yes, that park space that might otherwise be mandated could be waived through this process.
Well, I guess I would only say that in the general plan process, as we go through the city and it's a multi-year process on the housing element that we know now, but we haven't really we have not in the proposed housing element, that we're awaiting HCD. Did we hear from HCD yet?
We do anticipate a letter this week on our certification of the housing element. I think we hope to have good news this week. I'm encouraged, but we'll have an announcement later.
Okay, does that housing element address the setback density requirements, parks? So that will come out later in the general plan process?
Yes, so we're embarking upon a land use element update amendment
And
to
that's where it
incorporate
comes
the
in.
densities. We're also creating the zoning overlays to implement the housing element, and that will have the development standards and the review processes and all of the expectations for design. Again, with stipulation that a density bonus project could come in and waive those requirements.
Right, so what I was going to suggest, this is for future reference, I won't be here to say this again, is that there almost should be with waivers, without waivers, so the community, it's transparent what the projected impact could be with the density bonus, because 5, 7, 10 years from now, people will say, well, I didn't know about that. We only allow 6 inches of setback, or we have no green space. So if we're going to be adding potentially thousands of units, if a developer comes into the city and wants to take advantage of the city's opportunity to develop, let's just remember that density bonus law that we have no choice on, it's a mandate, may change the look and feel of this community in substantial ways. So just for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Avery.
Jim, so this last iteration of the density bonus, is the state, do you think the state's feeling that they haven't done enough to encourage people to take this new zoning and do their project? Or they've done some kind of calculation where it's not going to work, so they have to add this in? Is there any kind of logic to this?
I think the logic on the states is that additional density makes projects more financially viable, and this is a way to require or allow for higher density than a city might otherwise allow.
Right.
It does erode local control over our own land use
Sure.
decision-making policy. And I think the state feels that additional density is the way to try and make housing more viable and affordable housing happen.
But they didn't come out with this at the beginning. This is all adding on as we're going here. So they didn't quite do the math right, or they just decided,
I don't know if they didn't do the math right. Originally, the density bonus provision allowed up to 35% added bonus, if you will, density. And they had a very similar structure to what we described here today. And so over the years, the laws have changed. And I think with higher land values and higher construction costs, it is even more difficult to make it a project pencil out. And so I think the state's response is, well, let's throw more density at it and see if that works.
Right.
Is 50% magical? I don't know.
Right, and then the whole quality of life issue, when you have this much density in an area of people living together, and obviously for people that have nowhere else to live, this is this is good because they're going to perhaps be able to afford a place to live in. But without some real thought and sort of, you want to make places where people, they're healthy places to live. And if we're going to build boxes that have one window in front just to get, enough to make the project work, those aren't really great places to live for families, especially if there's no parks nearby, no recreation elements nearby. They've got to jump in a car to go anywhere. Because we're not planning, it's difficult to plan in these projects, I imagine, to figure out, who's going to open up a nearby store or a restaurant or a dry cleaners that they could potentially walk to. So all these things go into it, right? This just makes it more difficult from my standpoint.
Well, it is challenging. Take the airport area, for example, where we're recycling some of the older office buildings. We've seen a few projects come forward, and we've entitled a few more that are coming online shortly. We work closely with the developers. They're not really designing the box that you described, thankfully. They're highly amenitizing these buildings. Uptown Newport, for example, has 2 one-acre parks that are going to be coming forward.
Right.
The Newport Crossings project is going to be providing a half an acre. We're hopeful to get another half an acre adjacent to that with a future project. So I know we're planning for those areas. We know there's some deficiencies in that area, but I think we also should look at the airport area is slightly different. It's a little more urbanized, and so it's going to have a different look and feel than what we might expect in Corona Del Mar. And so, there's a lot of work to do to plan this community, and we're embarking on that process right now as part of updating our land use element and our overall general plan as well. So all of these factors will be thought through by the community, and we will have a dialogue about it.
Yeah, it's going to be a real task to make this a place that's good for people the airport area, where it ends up a place where people will not be forced to live, but will want to live, right? Forced by economic standards to live in a place that doesn't have a lot of amenities and parks. So I'm glad to hear that. And I think that's part and parcel to the airport area, is somehow coming up with a place that is right for people.
Thank you. Okay, any public comments on this item, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I want to begin by saying that I appreciate and I have no doubt of the good intentions of our city staff, but I'm sorry that Councilman O'Neill is not here tonight. You may recall at your last meeting, you unanimously approved an initiative of Councilman O'Neill to try to pare down, condense, reduce the size of our municipal code. So as he was fond of saying, we would not have laws so voluminous that they cannot be read or so incoherent that they cannot be understood. This proposal you have before you tonight is adding many thousands of words, many pages to our municipal code, which I think are unnecessary because it is primarily just attempting to restate the state's density bonus law. I understand the only requirement that the city has to do is to enact an ordinance explaining how we locally will process the requests for a density bonus. And I believe other cities have done it much more succinctly by simply referring that they will honor the state density bonus law, which is changing all the time, and we're not going to be able to keep up with it here. How they will process those requests subject to that law, and if necessary, any small deviations we may make from that code. The state code, our staff may find very hard to read, but it has been written by professional legislative analysts whose job is writing law. So presumably it is coherent and makes sense, even if it is very difficult to read. I don't think, and I don't mean any disrespect, our own staff, in attempting to rewrite it, I'm not sure has that same competence, and I don't think we need to do that, and I don't think we can keep up with the changes of the state law. So I would recommend not doing it this way, and I'm sorry Councilman O'Neill is not here to speak to that, because I believe he actually said he agreed with me on this one, because I pointed this out was coming to you as an example completely contrary to the idea of reducing and simplifying our municipal code. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward. All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the dais. Councilwoman Brenner?
Jim, could you address that? Why you and staff made the decision that we needed to spell this all out rather than handle it the way Jim had suggested?
Certainly, I think we initially were thinking the same thing. But ultimately, I've been working with the density bonus law on these projects, and because our code has deviated from the state law and is out of date, I've had to go in and review state law to implement it because it is a mandate. It is an extremely difficult, and Jim says it's difficult to read. It's extremely difficult to implement, and what that does is it opens up issues where we might make mistakes. We have to go back and read the law. The way that the state law is written, while legally correct, it is really difficult to use. And I need to have planners who can read this and implement and guide developers without making mistakes, or making as few mistakes as possible, correct? And so we feel that this is a better approach for us to have it here because it's a little easier to read. And we do have statements in the purpose section here that talk to that we're not providing any incentives beyond what the state law requires us to do. And so if it is misread in a way to a developer's advantage that goes beyond what we intended, we've got that provision there, and we'll be able to hold back an unintended consequence, if you will. Now, I understand the sentiment about having to update this because, we haven't updated for about 12 years. We will have to monitor what the state's doing and react accordingly and bring forward more timely updates as we go forward. But even in the event that a new state law comes down and it's a mandatory item, we're going to implement it. And we'll use that amendment going forward until we get back to the council and update our ordinance. But in summary, we believe this is the best approach to avoid mistakes and make it easier to implement here locally.
So basically what you're saying is that for efficiency of our staff, and we've got a very active building department where a lot of projects are coming through all the time. So for the efficiency of our staff to be able to do things the way they need to be done, we have gone in and molded this to our requirements so that they can use that rather than them having to all understand the complexities of the state law each and every time. Is that?
That is correct. We feel it is easier to go to our municipal code in the way that it's drafted to get the answers necessary to advise the development community than it is to go to state law. It is really a difficult read the way that it's written with all of the different citations to other code sections. You got to read a section, you see another code section it cites, you have to go read and understand what that does, and when that one has another code citation, you can see how challenging it is to actually understand the terms. And so we're defining those terms as you read the ordinance going forward, and we feel it's a much better way to organize it and is simpler to implement here locally. So
I can appreciate that because I feel like our staff and our planning department is probably as busy as any planning department in any city of our comparable size. And so I appreciate you explaining that because I think that tells us why we would want to go with your wishes on this. Thank you.
Will's not here to defend himself, but as an attorney that bills by the hour, you would want to force people to go to state statute, shepherdize it, look at case law, and come back. It makes total sense we make it available as a one-stop shop in our own books.
Mayor, I make a motion to support these changes as staff has directed.
Right, I'll second. Let's vote.
Prior to reading the vote, I'll read the ordinance title for Ordinance 2022-18, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach adopting zoning code amendment CA 2020-4, amending Chapter 20.32 density bonus and other related provisions of the Newport Beach Municipal Code related to density bonuses to comply with state law. As seen, it was approved 6-0.
Thank you. Now on to current business, item number 20, Newport Beach Junior Guard Building Project. Steph?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Exciting award tonight. Want to give you a little heads up on that. So our City Engineer Deputy Director Jim Houlihan's here to give a brief report if you'd like.
Brief. All right, brief. All right, so tonight we're here for the award of the construction contract. And real quick, the location of this building and in the A lot near Balboa Pier. The work also will include some improvements to the Main Street parking lot and also some EV stations along the promenade in the Rendezvous parking lot in that area. So we'll have 10 EV stations added over there as well. This is a rendering that was the concept approved in March of 2021. Some of the aspects to this building, it's approximately 5,100 square feet. The all-in cost, soft cost and engineering, a little over $7.8 million. The Junior Guard Foundation has committed an additional $300,000 to bring their total to $2,051,000. The city is looking to cover the remaining cost, which is a little over almost 5.8 million, and of that, we're proposing 5.2 million of ARPA funds coming to this project. Below, you can see the layout of the building. And the schedule for this, assuming award tonight, we would begin construction in about a month and condition the contractor to be complete by Memorial Day, so we can have this ready to go for the summer next year, for the next operating year. So these are the recommendations. Approve the plans, approve a budget amendment to accept the additional $300,000, increase the appropriation from ARPA of additional $1.6 million, award the construction contract to Teleco for $6.43 million, and establish a contingency, and then an additional addendum with our architect for construction support services. With that, any questions?
Okay, I don't see any from here. Comments from the public, please come forward. Okay, great, I see none. Okay, looks great. Yes, Councilman Brenner.
Aaron, having grandchildren in the Junior Guard program is not a conflict, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just say,
Yes, Councilwoman Dixon.
I'm pleased to support this and make the motion to support it. And I just note the additional funds that the Junior Guard Foundation has contributed. This is, since the project's inception, has been a public-private partnership. I don't know if it's literally 50-50 because we're doing some other infrastructure, parking lot repairs, et cetera, but the Junior Lifeguard Foundation has gone over and beyond probably what they expected to raise, and it's really fantastic to have a project that touches thousands and thousands of families in Newport Beach. And this is a well-designed, simple project, and really proud to support it and honored that the Junior Lifeguard Foundation has been a consistent partner from day one, I think starting in 2015, and to get to this point. And thank you, staff, for working with the prospective bidders to find a company. That we've worked with Teleco before. They built the Corona Del Mar new fire station and library, so you've worked with them before. They've come in with a reasonable bid, and I'm pleased to support it and look forward to it being done by next summer, right? All right, so I move the item.
Wait, a second by Councilman Avery, and you have something you want to add as well?
No, we all know this is a really good thing. It's such a part of our culture, and the last couple of years has really demonstrated why. Just the attendance and our effort to continue the tradition through COVID. It's great, and also this building will be available for groups to use during the off years the off months from junior lifeguards, and that'll bring in some income and help us maintain the building. And I think a lot of effort's gone into this project, which is relatively small, but I think it's going to be a great project. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's vote.
The motion carries 6-0.
Okay, thank you. Number 21 is approval of a 2-year amendment to a grant agreement with Trellis International.
Yes, again, Mayor, council members, Dave Webb, your Public Works Director. Happy to come back to you to talk about the pilot project you entered into the last year, and it's been real successful. So Teresa Schweitzer is with us tonight, our Administrative and Finance Manager, and she's going to give you a little introduction and some of the highlights of the past year and our recommendations going forward.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor Muldoon, members of the City Council. So again, yes, I'm Teresa Schweitzer. I'm the Public Works Finance and Administrative Manager, and here to talk to you about the proposed amendment to the Trellis International City Grant. Go. There we go. So a little bit of background. About a year ago, City Council approved a $30,000 grant agreement with Trellis International, a nonprofit organization located in Costa Mesa. And Trellis works with the homeless and Housing Insecure. An arm of Trellis, the Community Impact Team, is a voluntary service program, and the participants of the Community Impact Team gain work experience and skills with the goal to re-enter the workforce. And the grant agreement was a 1-year commitment. And so over this past year, they committed to working 8 or more work projects each month. They provide 3 to 4 volunteers and 1 supervisor at each project. And then the different types of projects that they would do are any kind of trash or debris cleanups, vegetation trimming, graffiti sticker removal, and et cetera. And so for the 1 year in review, Trellis successfully completed 99 projects over the last year at 24 different locations throughout the city. They provided us over 2,000 hours of volunteer hours and collected over 500 bags of trash and debris citywide. Some notable projects that they did, they focused on the city arterials and parks. They litter picked, they cleaned signs, benches, electrical boxes. They had projects at our civic center, cleaning the handrails, the signs, the maps, the EV stations, and the elevators. They did a project at our city corporation yard and painted trash can lids and lockers and cleaned up around the yard. And this last summer, they've been doing weekend beach cleanups, changing out the trash cans, picking up litter, and cleaning up around there. So this is just a map to show you all of the different locations throughout the city where work projects were completed. And so our proposed grant amendment is to add an additional 2 years to have the new termination date be September 14th, 2024. We want to increase the annual grant award from $30,000 a year to $50,000 a year, and with that also increase the number of work projects. We would like there to be about 2 work projects a week during the months of October through April. And then what we noticed this year through the busy summer months and the benefit of having the work projects done down on the beach, but wanting to also be able to maintain the other work projects that we have throughout the city. So increasing the work projects to 4 work projects a week during the summer months of May through September. And then having an additional 8 as needed work projects throughout the year. It would remain the same with 3 to 4 participants and a supervisor at every project, and they provide 4-hour projects. So now I would like to ask Terry Moore to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Teresa. Mr. Mayor, council members, Ms. Leung, and staff. What you see before you are some pictures of some of the projects that we've had. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you for last year taking a chance on an unknown group of people. I think this is a situation where we can all agree that it has turned out to be one of those really rare win-wins. The people that we are working with are volunteer staff, and you can see them there. I'm going to introduce some of them in a few minutes. But we are just delighted to be part of this community and part of doing this work. Teresa was able to share some metrics with you, some of the numbers of the amounts of trash. I think it's way more than 500, by the way. It could well be. But what I wanted to share just briefly with you are some of the intangibles. The entire reason that we started this program several years ago, really, is to really move people forward, people that are housing insecure, people who are suffering from homelessness. Sometimes that's a very hopeless situation to be in. This process that we have here has really helped to move people forward in their lives. There are several things that are difficult to quantify, but the amount of self-respect, the amount of the confidence and the sense of responsibility they are almost tangible. We consider them intangibles, but it's evident in all the people that we're working with. So many people that have been part of this process have moved forward into housing. Many of our people are currently in the Costa Mesa Bridge Shelter that we spend $1 million a year on here in Newport Beach. And what has really been the most amazing thing, I think, is the sense of community. We call this a community impact team. And it's not just that our people and our program is impacting the community of Newport Beach. There's a smaller community. There's a micro community. And that's the community within our program. In the homeless world, there's a lot of distrust from one homeless person to another. There is homeless on homeless theft. There is distrust that is rampant. And what we have seen, the most really amazing thing to me, is to see the sense of community that has developed. I won't go as far as to call it a family, although that's our goal, that they feel like a family, but people that have come together with a common goal. And it's truly been remarkable. I want to share one little thing. When I first pitched this program to Natalie and to Carol Jacobs a year and a half ago, one of the things that was kind of our dream, a dream that we shared, was that some people, homeless people, maybe living at the beach, maybe living someplace else in our community, would see these teams. And they would say, what's going on here? How do I get to be a part of that? And it took a long time, but 6 weeks ago, it finally happened. A guy showed up at our weekly meeting. I introduced myself, said, how did you get here? He said, you know what, I live in front of Blackie's, okay? That's kind of where I hang out. For the last few weeks, I've seen people in your yellow safety vests that say Community Impact Team picking up trash. And he said, I want to be part of that. And it was such a remarkable moment. I wish Carol were still here. I would love to tell her, and I hope somebody does, that came to fruition. So I think that's really all that I want to tell you, except that our people continue to grow as individuals and in our program. I invited a few people to share with you. I'd like the team to stand up. I have a couple of staff members, my boss actually, Scott, and my associate Ray. And then from the left we have Lisa, Danielle, and Sean. These are superstars in our program. I wanted to bring them here to honor them, really, and so they could kind of see this process and see that this is not a slam dunk. I mean, this is a proposal to you. There's no, we're not guaranteed that you're going to approve this. We hope that you do, but I wanted them to see this process and feel like they're part of it. So here we are, guys. Thank you so much. These guys are great. And the last thing, and then I'll sit down, is the amount of visibility that this program has brought within the community. Certainly this summer, we've been doing very difficult projects on the boardwalk and at the piers. but that's where the people are too. And so many people have seen us, and we've been able to interact with residents, with visitors, with tourists, and everybody is kind of going, wow, this is really great what you guys are doing. I think it reflects well certainly on our people, on our program, and it absolutely reflects beautifully on you as a council. So we thank you for your support and hope we will continue with it. If anyone has questions, I'll stand up here, and if not, I'll go sit down. Thank you, Diane.
That's great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Brenner, do you have something you wanted to?
I wanted to congratulate Terry and say how much Brad and I, being on the homeless task force team with him, getting to know him almost 4 years ago and watching this whole evolution, how rewarding it's been for us, and how fun it's been to go out and meet with your teams when they have projects, and to see their enthusiasm, and for them to know that they're really helping our community, I think is wonderful. And I would just like to ask that the Community Impact Team logo be really prominent on these vests, because I'd like for us to be able to encourage our citizens to more frequently say thank you to them as they're doing their work, just as we're very good about thanking our military and our police and our firemen. But I'd like for our citizens to be able to really recognize them easily and know that these are people that are really helping out and are making a big impact in our community. That's it. Thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Any public comments on this item?
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I just wanted to say this sounds like a really great program, and I support the continuation and increase of the grant. I hope and assume you are going to approve that. And without going too far off topic, since we've heard about a lot tonight about homeless in our city, I wanted to mention that earlier in the meeting, the fire chief had a chance to respond to a grand jury report about fire paramedic service. And I just wanted to point out, I am aware that the grand jury this past year also issued a report on the city's response to homelessness. And if I'm not mistaken, a response to that grand jury report, which I don't think faulted Newport Beach, but did ask for a response from us. I believe that response will be on your next meeting agenda, because I think it's due by then. So I think we will have yet another opportunity to hear what our city is doing to address this human tragedy of homelessness. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring this item back to the dais. Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Councilwoman Dixon. Is there a second?
Could I second?
Sure. Seconded by Councilwoman Brenner. Let's vote.
The motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please read the announcement for motions for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the City Council, either this meeting or the previous meeting, may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
All right, see no motion to reconsider. Tonight we are adjourning in memory of Salvador Avila and of Gail Lynch. And I'm going to offer Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Blom to do the honors.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with Papa Avila, as most of us knew him as. An amazing man I spent actually a huge amount of my growing up with. Tonight we adjourn in the memory of Salvador Avila, Newport Beach resident and a founder of the very successful Avila's El Ranchito. He died on July 28th in his home on Half Moon Bay Drive, actually, in Spyglass Hill. Used to have the world's best brunches up there. Avila was an immigrant who worked in construction before starting his first El Ranchito restaurant in Huntington Park in 1966. He started the restaurant with just $2,000 and his mother's family recipes. It's a little more expensive these days. Over the years, Avila built up the popular restaurant chain to 13 locations, with 12 in Orange County, including, of course, the most famous location on Balboa Peninsula, which opened in 1975. In the 80s, Avila and his wife Margarita, Mama Avila, relocated to Newport Beach and became residents of Spyglass Hill. He was known as an avid runner, a hobby he took up at the age of 50. At age 75, he ran in his first LA Marathon and did so every year until the age of 81. His family said in a statement, "Like so many immigrant entrepreneurs, Papa Avila believed in the American dream, and he was determined to find a way to create a meaningful future for his family. His meaningful life lessons directed his children, family, and friends to reflect on their lives and hearts. He ingrained in his children the value of their Mexican heritage and to never forget where they came from." Mama Avila had passed away in 2019 at the age of 93. Salvador Avila is survived by 6 children, 14 grandchildren, and 19 great-grandchildren, all who run all of the restaurants today, which is an amazing legacy to push forth. So, as this tends to be an adjournment in honor of restaurateurs throughout Newport Beach that have passed away, Gail Marie Lynch, 74, of Newport Beach, passed away on July 22nd. Gail was the founder, owner, and operator of Mutt Lynch's restaurant and bar for almost 50 years. She is survived by her husband Dan, daughter Megan, and son Ryan, and their grandchildren. Gail is a perfect example of someone who lived the American dream. She was born and raised in the San Gabriel Valley. She moved to Newport Beach when she was 22 years old and quietly became one of the longest operating and most successful restaurateurs in Orange County. She was responsible for employing well over 2,000 individuals and served millions of customers over her career. A culture was created to reflect the roots of the Newport Beach lifestyle and soul. Gail was a true patriot, and she directed fundraising efforts to the local ASPCA, donated to Newport Beach Fire and Police Departments, as well as the local youth sports, recreation, and scholarships. The spirit of Gail continues to live on through her children and her grandchildren. I leave you with Gail's favorite phrase to embody the generosity that she so graciously extended to all. It's a party, and everyone's invited.
Thank you, Noah. We are adjourned.